level yet in the pandemic.
The South isn't the only place seeing a surge as cases in California rise. The state is shutting down indoor business in counties holding over 70% of the population. Ed Baxter has the latest from our Bloomberg 960 newsroom in San Francisco.
Governor Gavin Newsom says Los Angeles County is included.
In restaurants, wineries, and tasting rooms, movie theaters, family entertainment, broadly defined, zoos, museums, and card rooms.
He also said the state is setting up what he calls enforcement strike teams made up of regulators which can act on businesses. He is also discouraging family 4th of July gatherings, saying extended families are among the fastest growing spread of the virus. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Thanks, Ed. As the outbreak spreads, McDonald's is stopping dine-in services at all locations across the country. Apple had just reopened stores. Now it's closing them again. With more on that, here's Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
The technology giant is closing several stores in the Los Angeles area, along with locations in Las Vegas, Alabama, Idaho, Oklahoma, Georgia, and Louisiana. It earlier shut stores in Florida, Mississippi, Texas, and Utah, bringing the total to 77. Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Charlie, thank you. As business hits pause, it raises questions about how relevant today's jobs data will be. We get the payrolls report for June in about 2.5 hours from now. And here with the preview is Bloomberg's Michael McKee.
The spike in COVID cases around the country has states and cities rolling back reopening plans, raising questions about how many people hired back in June will be unemployed again in July. The unemployment rate, meanwhile, will suffer from classification errors, either continued confusion about who is or isn't on payrolls, or because they've fixed the errors and the data don't line up with previous months. Political candidates will jump on any numbers that might suggest how fast the labor market is recovering, while the Black Lives Matter protests put a spotlight on minority unemployment rates. Michael McKee, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Michael, thank you. And tune in for live coverage and analysis of the jobs data at 8:30 a.m. Wall Street time, followed by an interview with White House economic advisor Larry Kudlow. Catch that conversation at 10 a.m. on Bloomberg Radio and television.
On the policy front, minutes from the latest Fed meeting show officials staying clear of yield curve control. For now, Bloomberg's John Tucker joins us live with details. Good morning, John.
Yeah, Nathan, Fed officials did discuss setting targets for Treasury yields, but the minutes show they were very wary. The minutes also note the need for highly accommodative monetary policy for some time to come. Well, some officials expressed concern that low yields make their asset purchases less effective. When it comes to the economy, policymakers expect consumer spending to rebound strongly in the second half. They also appear willing to push lawmakers for additional stimulus. I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
John, thank you. And on the political front, the House has passed a bill imposing sanctions on banks that do business with China. We get the details on the measure from Bloomberg's Selena Wang in Beijing.
This bill is similar but not identical to the measure passed by the Senate last week, which would impose sanctions on banks that do business with Chinese officials involved in cracking down on Hong Kong. But this bill does still need to be approved by the Senate again before going to President Trump for his signature. But that is expected to happen very soon. This move is in response to China enacting the national security law in Hong Kong, which goes beyond what many investors, democracy advocates, and even pro-Beijing politicians have expected. According to Bloomberg Intelligence, China's largest banks have some $1.1 trillion in dollar funding at stake and face potentially steep fines from this sanctions bill.
Bloomberg's Selena Wang reports the measure is in addition to sanctions punishing China over human rights abuses. Those penalties had been delayed by the White House as officials negotiated their Phase 1 trade deal. Futures this morning are on the rise. S&P futures up about 17 points. Dow futures up 203. NASDAQ futures up 36. The DAX in Germany's up 1.6%. 10-year Treasury up 1/32, yield 0.67%, and the yield on the 2-year 0.16%. And straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news, and this is Bloomberg.
All right, Karen, thank you. It is 6:07 on Wall Street, and Amy Morris is here with more on the surging coronavirus across the country. Good morning, Amy.
Good morning, Nathan. As that number of positive coronavirus cases in more than half the country is rising, in New York State, Governor Andrew Cuomo says virus testing is open to all residents.
We're now expanding our testing criteria. We have so increased our testing capacity that we can expand our testing criteria.
He says it doesn't cost anything, it doesn't hurt, and he is urging all New Yorkers to get tested. There are now more than 750 testing sites throughout the state of New York. Now, indoor dining at New York City restaurants is on hold out of concern it would cause a spike in coronavirus infections. Mayor Bill de Blasio says there's still plenty of room for dining al fresco.
It is the time to double down on outdoor dining. And so far, we have 6,600 restaurants that have taken advantage of our Open Restaurants initiative. I believe there are many more that could benefit from it.
De Blasio did say New Yorkers are free to hit the shoreline.
Our New York City beaches open today.
Atlantic City's casinos will also reopen today. Gamblers will not be allowed to smoke, drink, or eat inside the casinos. You'll still have to wear a mask, and you have your temperature checked when you're there. New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy says residents can still easily undo all of the work toward curbing the spread of the coronavirus.
Everyone needs to be an example of personal responsibility. It isn't up to some of us to beat COVID-19. It's up to every single one of the 9 million of us.
New Jersey has also hit pause on reopening indoor dining. There's been a one-day uptick in coronavirus hospitalizations. President Trump has said he would wear a mask if he were in a tight situation with people, but that he's not convinced they should be required, even as cases are spiking in parts of the U.S.
I have no problem with that. I think, and if people feel good about it, they should do it.
The president tells Fox Business that everyone around him is tested for coronavirus. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg Nathan.
Thanks, Amy. 6:09 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg Sports Update. Here's John Stashower.
All right, Nathan, that ugly baseball labor dispute that nearly prevented any season from being played created bad blood that could linger into negotiations for an actual collective bargaining agreement. The current one expires after next season, and this won't help. Commissioner Rob Manfred told Dan Patrick's radio show that the owners were never going to agree to play more than the 60 games they are playing. And that may come as news to the players, whose first proposal was to play 114 games. For now, players are back with their teams. Aaron Boone talked to the YES Network about precautions at Yankee camp.
We'll work closely with the guidelines, with trainers, with how we have to, space guys out and work things out. We feel like we've got a pretty good plan in place. We know we're going to have to remain flexible as we go, as things change. But I do feel like we're ready to, kick things off and hopefully make the most of the 3 weeks we have building up into the season.
Boone's Yankees were supposed to play a game this season in Iowa against the White Sox, the so-called Field of Dreams game, but they aren't playing the White Sox. They're not traveling that far. So reportedly, the White Sox will instead face the Cardinals in Iowa. August 13th, they've built an 8,000-seat stadium for the game, but presumably fans will not be allowed in. Bill Cowher, the former Steelers coach, was to be inducted into the Hall of Fame next month. Those ceremonies put off until next year. Cowher has revealed that he and his wife both had the virus. They had symptoms in March after trips to New York and Hawaii. Never got tested, but got a positive test for antibodies in April. The virus is causing the NFL to do something many have called for anyway, a reduction of the preseason, at least for this year. It goes from 4 games down to 2. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports. Nathan?
All right, John, thanks. Tune in tomorrow night for the Bloomberg Business of Sports show. We'll have a wide-ranging interview with Atlanta Hawks CEO Steve Koonin, getting back to basketball during the pandemic, plus the team turning their arena into Georgia's largest ever voting center this fall will be just some of the topics you will hear tomorrow night at 7 and Saturday at 11 a.m. on Bloomberg Radio. And subscribe to the Bloomberg Business of Sports wherever you get your podcasts. S&P futures higher by 17 points before the release of the June jobs report and weekly unemployment claims. Dow futures up 213, NASDAQ futures higher by 38 points. This is Bloomberg.
Hey, y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering the innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies.
Hey, I'm Robin, one of the tech experts here to help you at Curry's PC World. I'm not just a voice on the radio. You can now come into your local store and talk tech with a human being like me. Just the news you needed this morning. We've put all the right measures in place to help you again safely in your local Staples Corner store. The tech experts are back in town. So come in and see if that laptop can help you improve your home setup. And welcome back to your local Curry's PC World.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Thursday morning by the scruff of the neck. Ignore this gloomy weather and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
London. Toolstation are here to help get your job safely started and finished, with over 60 branches within the M25. All open with social distancing and contactless click and collect from 5 minutes. And with 20,000 top trade quality products to choose from. Order online now for collection in London branches and get £5 off when you spend over £30 with the code LON530. So, get your job started at toolstation.com. Terms and conditions apply.
How do we control coronavirus now? This is Scott. He's a nurse.
NHS Test and Trace helps stop the spread of the virus in our communities. If you've got symptoms, even mild ones, get a test immediately. Don't leave home for any other reason. If you test positive, we can trace the people you've been in contact with and contain the virus. So get tested and protect each other.
To get a test, go to nhs.uk/coronavirus or call 119. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
Television. Here's Sherry Ann.
Joining us, Abebe Amro-Selassie, Director of the Africa Department at the IMF. How feasible is it to expect a continent like Africa, where there are so many people living in poverty, to effectively shut down their economies?
That has indeed been one of the challenges that policymakers have faced. Notably, the duration of containment measures has been weaker, and there's been quite a bit of difference between de jure legal measures versus what on the ground has actually happened. And of course, given that the social safety nets remain much weaker in the region or non-existent in many countries, it has, of course, been very difficult for governments to strictly enforce containment measures. That's why we've seen the pressure to ease coming quite quickly before the number of case load increase has flattened. This said, I have to point also to some really very innovative and remarkably supportive new policy measures that countries have been undertaking. You've had countries like Togo, which have adopted very nimbly new approaches to provide social safety nets, for example, using existing mobile money systems to identify people with low balances to do some transfers, and many other innovations across the region also.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. European stocks rising along with U.S. stock index futures as hopes for reassuring jobs data later in Washington add to momentum from positive vaccine developments. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 16 points this morning. Dow futures up 201. NASDAQ futures up 38. The DAX in Germany's up 1.5%. 10-year Treasury up 130. Second yield 0.67%. The yield on the 2-year 0.16%. NYMEX crude oil's up 0.4% or 15 cents at $39.96 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.3% or $5.30 at $17.8520 an ounce. The euro 1.1279 against the dollar. British pound 1.2508 and the yen 107.44. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Amy Morris with more on what's going on around the world. Amy.
Karen, the surge in coronavirus infections continues throughout the South. Arizona reporting a record number of cases, plus increases in deaths and emergency room admissions. Daily infections also hit a record in Texas, where intensive care units in Houston have now exceeded full capacity. Infections in Florida are rising, prompting Miami-Dade County to require masks in public. Pennsylvania will also now require masks. For the first time, daily coronavirus cases passed 50,000 nationwide. That's the highest level yet in the pandemic. Other news we're watching: House lawmakers passed a bill imposing sanctions on banks that do business with Chinese officials involved in cracking down on pro-democracy protesters in Hong Kong. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Okay, Amy, thank you. It is 6:19 on Wall Street and live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak. On this Jobs Thursday, we're joined by Kevin Cummins, economist at NatWest Markets. Of course, we're getting the June payrolls report and the latest weekly jobless claims at the same time this morning. What's going to have more weight for you, Kevin?
I think the monthly jobs report, just because it's so comprehensive. The weekly jobless claims data have given a bit of a mixed backdrop over the past couple of months from the respective, like, for example, last month there was an enormous miss and underestimated going into the monthly jobs report estimates based on if you were to just look at initial jobless claims. So normally claims, I think, are a very reliable indicator, but I think there's some distortions going on with those numbers, given that it's likely that we're still seeing a lagged effect of earlier claims and perhaps people are refiling and there's some double counting going on because claims have come down, but they're still at a stubbornly high level.
All right, so what are you going to be looking for specifically in the broader report that's going to help you gauge the path of the recovery for the labor market?
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see as far as how quickly jobs are added back. I think in the big picture, you know, I myself am looking for a little bit of fireworks. I see this morning that payrolls and the Bloomberg consensus are a little above 3 million. I'm well more than double that. I'm up over 7 million job gains in June. So we'll see. I mean, there was obviously an enormous miss, and, you know, creating a precise estimate for payrolls in the current environment is extremely difficult. So I think you kind of got to look through a little bit of the noise. One of the big things that I think people will be focused on is whether or not the BLS is able to sort of correct for this miscalculation issue that they've underestimated the unemployment rate. So what's oddly enough, they've had this issue the past several months now where the people who are conducting the survey and the people who are responding, there's some miscommunication there in that they're classifying employed people or people who have been laid off temporarily as employed for other reasons. So if those workers were counted as employed, then the unemployment rate is artificially being held back.
There's been this classification issue that in April it underestimated, according to the BLS, nearly 5 percentage points higher the unemployment rate would be, and then in May it would have been 3 percentage points higher. The BLS obviously is well aware of this. They put up some notes this week and background information. They think that they have improved the process, but we'll see. It wouldn't be. It could be a little bit unclear because you could see the unemployment rate actually rise versus May, even though it will fall if the classification issue was removed for those earlier months, which they've said they're not going to change the earlier months numbers. So it could create a little confusion there. So some clarity from the BLS, I assume, on this will be released at 8:30.
Even if we get that clarity and if we get a jump in payrolls, how much will it matter, though, if we are starting to see, as we are, this dial back in reopening activity in the parts of the country that are seeing surges in coronavirus?
Yeah, I think that's hitting it on the head for the next month's report. I think this is a little bit stale from that perspective, that we are starting to see kind of the pause button hit on a lot of these states that are kind of starting to reopen. And even from a broader perspective, not even so much what's going on, say, this week or next week or last week, but even from a broader perspective, I mean, we saw an above consensus number last month of 2.5 million jobs added. If you look at the level of payrolls versus where you were in February, you were still 13% below where you were. So there are over 15 million unemployed people. And if you look at the number of job losses, that number goes up to 20 million. It's going to take a long time, and it's going to take very strong job growth to get back to pre-COVID levels. So, the recovery is going to be a very gradual, prolonged recovery. Even if today's number beats expectations, and if for the sake of luck it comes in as close to my number, I think people have to consider how deep and how severe this current recession is. It's the deepest in postmodern history. So, from a broader perspective, the unemployment rate is still nearly 10 percentage points above where it was at 3.5% heading into this pandemic.
Well, a lot to watch out for as that June payrolls report and the weekly unemployment claims come out at 8:30 a.m. Wall Street time, just a little more than 2 hours from now. Kevin Cummins, economist at NatWest Markets, thanks so much for the preview. Really appreciate it this morning. Ahead of all that, futures are pointing higher with S&P futures gaining by almost 16 points right now. Dow futures up 199, NASDAQ futures ahead by 35 points, 10-year 0.67% yield, and the yield on the 2-year 0.16%. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. The June jobs report is out today, a day earlier than usual because of the Independence Day holiday. Economists are expecting to see that employers added just over 3 million workers, while the jobless rate is expected to drop to 12.5% from 13.3%. The numbers could again be the subject of confusion and debate. That's because some of the figures have been hit by data quality issues, especially the misclassification of out-of-work Americans as employed. The problem has caused the official unemployment rate to understate the degree of joblessness during the pandemic. JetBlue has agreed not to furlough any pilots involuntarily until May 1st in exchange for unspecified contract concessions aimed at helping the carrier cut expenses. But American has told flight attendants it has as many as 8,000 more of them than it needs, and said it would offer more leave programs and a voluntary separation package to try to minimize the need for furloughs. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services.
And place an order again to buy British pounds.
Website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
For the Jewish Communal Fund.
Different adapts, different overcomes, different keeps moving, different keeps thinking, different stays connected, different never stops dreaming. The University of Northampton invites you to a virtual open day for a taste of all the benefits of studying with us from this September. Search University of Northampton Virtual Open Days. It's the future, but different.
Hey, I'm Robin, one of the tech experts here to help you at Curry's PC World. I'm not just a voice on the radio. You can now come into your local store and talk tech with a human being like me. Just the news you needed this morning. We've put all the right measures in place to help you again safely in your local Staples Corner store. The tech experts are back in town, so come in and talk laptops and washing machines or fridges and TVs. And welcome back to your local Curry's PC World.
Are you ready to play?
This summer ITV Hub is fully loaded with loads more full series.
Gonna get messy.
Yeah, like it's fuller than ever. From Love Island to Laya, we have divas lined up back to back.
Feel me and sister.
From the GC and the Ibiza Weekender reps to the Real Housewives, it's round full of lots and lots of...
This is getting too much now.
Laughs, tears and smiles. It's crammed full with full series like Quiz, Flesh and Blood, Harry's Heroes and Manx in Mumbai. We've grown, expanded and just gone a bit extra this
And order cancelled again to buy British pounds.
At Asda, you can get a 4-pack of Prima disposable face coverings for £2.80, or a 2-pack of washable face coverings from £2.50. Asda, we're all in this together. Selected stores subject to availability.
If you can build that flat-pack wardrobe without looking at the instructions, you've still got it. If you can manage 5 keepy uppies on your first go, you've without question still got it. If you can toss a pancake to the ceiling and not let it hit the floor, surely you've still got it. And if you can just about fit into those jeans you bought 5 years ago, you've definitely still got it. Brute, still got it.
London. Toolstation are here to help get your job safely started and finished, with over 60 branches within the M25. All open with social distancing and contactless click and collect from 5 minutes. And with 20,000 top trade quality products to choose from. Order online now for collection in London branches and get £5 off when you spend over £30 with the code LON530. So, get your job started at toolstation.com. Terms and conditions apply.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York, Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960 to the country, Sirius XM Channel 119, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
At 6:30 on Wall Street, good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow, and we're just about 3 hours away from the opening of U.S. trading. Let's get you up to date on the news you need to know at this hour. U.S. futures are gaining ahead of the monthly jobs report, and despite a surge in coronavirus infections, Arizona reported a record number of cases on the same day Vice President Mike Pence paid a visit to the state.
With cases rising dramatically, not just here in Maricopa County, but all across Arizona, we wanted to be here to get a report from the ground.
And that report showed a daily jump of 5,000 new cases. Daily infections also hit a record in Texas, where intensive care units in Houston have now exceeded full capacity.
Now, the outbreak has California Governor Gavin Newsom shutting down some business operations.
We have specifically targeted our efforts to close indoor operations, and I want to reinforce this, indoor operations.
Well, the move will affect counties that hold more than 70% of the state's population as cases in California rise. Still, President Trump expects the pandemic to fade. He spoke with Blake Berman on Fox Business.
I think that at some point that's going to sort of just disappear, I hope.
You still believe so? Disappear?
Well, I do. Yeah, sure, at some point. And I think we're going to have a vaccine very soon, too.
For the first time, daily coronavirus cases passed 50,000 nationwide. That's the highest level yet in the pandemic.
As fresh restrictions take effect, it raises questions about how relevant today's jobs data will be. Paul Krugman is Distinguished Professor of Economics at City University of New York.
Going to look good, but it's going to be in the rearview mirror, and it's going to be a dead cat bounce. And it's clear that the high-frequency data and everything we're seeing says that we just hit a wall because of the spike in cases in the Sun Belt.
Tune in 2 hours from now for live coverage and analysis of the payrolls report, followed by an interview with White House economic advisor Larry Kudlow.
Well, meantime, minutes from the latest Fed meeting show officials staying clear of yield curve control for now. Bloomberg's John Tucker joins us live with details. Good morning, John.
And Nathan, central bankers seem opposed to caps on yields or targets anytime soon. Nearly all the participants had questions regarding the costs and benefits of yield curve control. They also appear ready to enhance forward guidance by tying future moves by the Fed to inflation or unemployment. I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, John, thank you. S&P futures higher this morning, up 17 points. Dow futures up 218. NASDAQ futures up 36. The DAX in Germany is up 1.6%. 10-year Treasury, little change, yield 0.67%. The yield on the 2-year, 0.16%. NYMEX crude oil is up 0.6% or 24 cents at $40.07 a barrel. And straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news, and this is Bloomberg.
All right, Karen, thank you. 6:33 on Wall Street. Let's get a deeper look now at the coronavirus surge. Here's Bloomberg's Amy Morris. Amy?
Well, Nathan, we are seeing more positive coronavirus cases than ever each day in the U.S. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo is making testing available now to all residents for free.
All New Yorkers can now go get a test. And what I'm saying to all New Yorkers today is, go get a test.
There are now more than 750 testing sites throughout the state of New York. But concerns about a resurgence of the virus in New York City put a hold on indoor dining. Mayor Bill de Blasio says the infection spikes in places that have tried it, indoor dining, it's a deterrent.
We're going to work with the state of New York to figure out what is the exact right way to do this. How to postpone indoor dining till the right moment. What the approach would be to determine when it makes sense to go about it again.
De Blasio did say the beaches are open just in time for the long Independence Day weekend.
We are ready for a great holiday weekend. The lifeguards are ready to go. New Yorkers can stay cool.
A one-day uptick in hospitalizations in New Jersey rang some alarm bells for Governor Phil Murphy. In the past day, 45 people have died from COVID-19.
We know we are going to keep having days where the numbers go up. The task for all of us is to make sure that those one-day increases don't turn into trends.
New Jersey has also delayed reopening indoor dining. Murphy says it is easy to become complacent.
No one, absolutely no one, especially our younger residents, can be lulled into complacency and think it's okay to crowd around bars without any regard for those around us. That is how we backslide. That's how we get pushed off our road back.
Atlantic City casinos reopening today with masks required and with temperature checks. No food, no beverages, no smoking. President Trump tells Fox Business that masks are fine if you want to wear one, but he doesn't believe they need to be required.
I'm all for masks. I think masks are good. I would wear, if I were in a group of people and I was close.
You would wear one?
Oh, I would. Oh, I have. I mean, people have seen me wearing one.
While he has pushed back against wearing a mask himself, he says he likes the way he looks in a mask. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Thank you, Amy. 6:35 on Wall Street. John Stashauer is here with the Bloomberg Sports Update.
All right, Nathan, Mets and Yankees have begun summer training. Players got tested yesterday. There'll be workouts this weekend. And Aaron Boone told the Yes Network that before the July 23rd opening day, his team will be playing against each other.
It's going to be different than a normal spring training. We're going to, put a lot of value on live reps, pitchers facing hitters, hitters facing pitchers, getting live defensive reps, trying to build guys up as safely and as smartly as we can. But we are going to put a value on competition from pretty early on in camp.
Boone's Yankees appear healthy with Aaron Judge, Aaron Hicks, James Paxton, and Giancarlo Stanton all having pretty much recovered from injuries. Stanton's expected to be used mostly as the DH. At Mets camp, Yoenis Cespedes, named from the past. He's only played 38 games since 2017, but after surgery on both heels, he could be the Mets DH. It's now the rule in both leagues. The Mets say Michael Conforto, who hurt his oblique in the spring, has recovered. Angels say Shohei Ohtani will be their DH when he's not pitching. He'll go back to doing both. Last season, he was just a hitter. The Mexican Baseball League's been around for nearly a century, was to start play next month, now canceling the season. There are those that think winning the championship in any of these sports will be more challenging than in any other season, considering the distractions and complications of the virus. Giannis Antetokounmpo, the reigning NBA MVP, points out there's no home court advantage. That hurts a team like Milwaukee, who was a league-leading 53-12 at the time of the shutdown in March. John Stashauer, Bloomberg Sports. Nathan?
All right, John, thank you. Turning back to markets now, gold is up 16% on the year as central banks around the world take extraordinary measures to stem the fallout from COVID-19. And there's more room for gold to run, according to Francisco Blanche. Bank of America's head of commodities and derivatives research is raising his 18-month price target for the metal to $3,000.
I think there's a pretty good chance here that we'll see a big rotation into gold. Investors are confused. They don't know what to do with their asset allocations. And I think that a lot of them will end up choosing to go for the yellow metal as an alternative to cash. And that's ultimately what I think is going to drive this. And by the way, when I say investors, I don't mean just retail investors. I also think institutional investors are going to make that choice.
And checking gold right now, it is higher by 0.25% or $4.50 at $17.8440 an ounce. Now, some other stories we're following. JetBlue has agreed not to furlough any pilots involuntarily until next May. That's in exchange for unspecified contract concessions designed to help the carrier cut expenses. Airlines worldwide have been slashing costs and reducing operations in response to the near disappearance of demand. Novartis is ending almost a decade of litigation, agreeing to pay more than $670 million to resolve a whistleblower case accusing the drug maker of paying kickbacks to doctors who prescribed its medicines. And Lemonade has raised nearly $320 million in its U.S. IPO. That's above the marketed range. It'll give the online home insurance provider a market value of $1.6 billion. Lemonade is backed by Japan's SoftBank Group, and it begins trading today on the New York Stock Exchange. Jeff Bezos is getting richer. Another day of gains for Amazon sent the CEO and founder's net worth to a new record that we hear about from Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
Shares of the Seattle-based retailer surged 4.4% to a record $2,878, boosting the founder's world-leading fortune to $171.6 billion. That tops his previous high of $167.7 billion, set in September of 2018, according to the Bloomberg Billionaires Index. His gains of $56.7 billion this year alone underscore a widening wealth gap in the U.S. during the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression. Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Thanks, Charlie. 6:39 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg Green Report. Here's Jeff Bellinger.
A paper prepared by 16 academic and government scientists says a global effort is needed to control so-called forever chemicals found in products ranging from textiles to firefighting foam. The American and European experts write in the journal Environmental Science and Technology Letters that the extreme persistence and potential harm from thousands of polyfluoroalkyl substances, or PFAs, require that they be controlled as a single class. The authors say the chemicals have similar molecular structures, environmental properties, and biological hazards, and managing them as a class can be an effective way to reduce adverse effects. They warn that continued use will result in increasing concentrations of PFAs, leading to more organisms being exposed and increasing the probability of harm. The paper says PFAs should be limited to essential uses only as safer alternatives are developed. Jeff Bellinger, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Jeff, thank you. S&P futures higher by 19 points. Dow futures up 238. NASDAQ futures a gain of 38 points. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing, LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then go to Babbel.com, download the app, and try it for free. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just go to Babbel.com and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or go to Babbel.com and try it for free. That's Babbel.com.
This is a Bloomberg.
For the friendships, for the fresh air, for the space to grow, for the knowledge, for the sport, for the outdoor education, for the wide horizons, for the academic excellence, for the future. Unleash your child's education at West Buckland School, a co-educational day and boarding school in beautiful North Devon. If you're moving to the southwest for a better quality of life, this is education without compromise, in what the Good Schools Guide called a gem of a school in an exceptional location. To see for yourself, find us at westbuckland.com.
When your tenants have a blown fuse box right in the middle of your busy day, superheroes crashing through the wall isn't going to help anyone. With Direct Line Landlord Emergency added to your policy, we're on it to send a rather super electrician in 4 hours before you've even sat down to dinner. We can also assemble plumbers, locksmiths, glaziers and drainage engineers. Search Direct Line Landlord Emergency. We're on it. Direct Line. Residential properties. Optional add-on up to $1,500 per caller. Extreme weather conditions may extend response time. Underwritten by UK Insurance Limited.
With the shift to remote working, video conferencing has become the new normal to keep your business running. But is it reliable and secure? Cisco WebEx is committed to the highest security standards and already trusted by both small businesses and many of the world's largest organizations. Call, message and meet securely with Cisco WebEx. Sign up at cisco.uk/work-from-home. When secure remote work is critical, WebEx is essential.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. We can replace your battery at over 700 stores and garages, or even at your home or work with our mobile experts, so you can enjoy an engine that starts first time, every time, and start enjoying the open road again.
Are we nearly there yet?
From battery replacements to tyre fittings to MOTs, there really is no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
When family video calls are too good to miss. Your virtual quiz team is demanding a rematch. And one more episode just isn't enough. You need loads of data. Get a massive 30 gig for £10 a month from Smarty Mobile. With no speed restrictions, unlimited calls and texts, and a flexible 1-month plan, it's no wonder you Switch awarded Smarty Best Value SIM-Only Network 2020. Search Smarty. Simple, honest mobile. See smarty.co.uk.
And financial information 24 hours a day. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
America reporting its highest one-day new infection numbers. Just yesterday, at least 12 states are seeing increased hospitalizations over COVID-19, including Florida and Texas. From the Golden State.
Nearly 6,000 new coronavirus cases reported in California Wednesday, a record-breaking number sparking new shutdown orders for indoor activities for almost 75% of the state's population. In neighboring Arizona, they're asking for 500 additional medical personnel to help deal with their dramatic surge, reporting their ICU beds are at nearly 90% capacity. Texas, North Carolina, and Tennessee also reporting record high numbers of cases Wednesday. I'm Nadia Romero reporting.
Today, a bipartisan group of lawmakers in Washington will be briefed on intelligence that alleges Moscow was offering bounties for attacks on U.S. troops based in Afghanistan. I'm John Trout.
It's a new disease making an unprecedented impact.
Job losses were widespread.
It is a stunningly historic moment.
Your best strategy?
Is this a market that's accepted reality?
Bloomberg Surveillance, weekday mornings at 7 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. U.S. futures are rising along with European shares as hopes for reassuring jobs data later in Washington add to momentum from positive vaccine developments. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are up 21 points. Dow futures up 247. NASDAQ futures up 39. The DAX in Germany is up 1.7%. 10-year Treasury, little change, yield 0.67%. The yield on the 2-year, 0.16%. NYMEX crude oil is up 0.6% or 24 cents at $40.06 a barrel. COMEX gold up 0.25% or $4.10 at $17.84 an ounce. The euro 1.1286 against the dollar. British pound 1.2514 and the yen 107.47. And we are watching for the June jobs report at 8:30 Wall Street time. It is being released a day early as markets will be closed tomorrow for the July 4th holiday. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Amy Morris with more on what's going on around the world. Amy.
Karen, for the first time, daily coronavirus cases passed 50,000 nationwide, the highest level yet in the pandemic. Many of those caseloads surging across the South. Arizona reporting a record number of cases, plus increases in deaths and emergency room admissions. Daily infections hitting a record also in Texas, where intensive care units in Houston have exceeded full capacity. Infections in Florida also rising, prompting Miami-Dade County to require masks in public. But it's not just the South. Pennsylvania also now requiring masks. Other news we're following, House lawmakers passing a bill imposing sanctions on banks that do business with Chinese officials involved in cracking down on pro-democracy protesters in Hong Kong. The measure could head to the president's desk as soon as today. And the defense authorization bill unanimously passed the House Armed Services Committee. It includes a provision renaming military bases that are named for Confederate generals. President Trump has already threatened to veto the Senate's version of the bill. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Okay, Amy, thanks. We're live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios. We're at 649 on Wall Street. Time now to check what's going on in D.C. Some of the top stories in the nation's capital. The House passes sanctions on China related to the new national security law in Hong Kong. More than half the Senate signs on to a bill to make Juneteenth a federal holiday. And Joe Biden out-fundraises President Trump for a second straight month with a $141 million haul in June. Also making news, the president speaking out for the first time about reports that Russia paid bounties to kill American forces in Afghanistan. Bloomberg News politics editor Kathleen Hunter joins me now with the latest on that, a story we've been following for the last several days, of course. And the president gave an interview to Fox Business Network in which he said that the story is a hoax by the newspapers and the Democrats. Is that lining up with what the White House has been telling lawmakers over the last few days?
Well, the thing is that it isn't really lining up. You know, what the White House has been telling lawmakers is more along the lines of, you know, this is something that they weren't totally able to verify, and that's why it wasn't brought to the level of, you know, being Trump being fully read in on it. And, you know, Trump coming out and calling it a hoax altogether essentially saying there's no veracity to the reports at all is certainly a departure from what the White House has been saying.
And we continue to get further reporting on just what it may have been behind that Russia bounty story. What kinds of questions does this continue to raise about the way that intelligence information is being presented to the president?
Well, I think there's several levels of questions. There's questions at this stage about, at what stage in the process of, looking at intelligence and deciding, the relative level of, veracity that's attached to it. At what stage in that process is the decision made to then brief the president on that intelligence, or at least provide that intelligence in the presidential daily briefing, which is a report that Trump receives, that every president receives every day. And then there's kind of a second level of questions about, the extent to which Trump actually reads those reports and digests them. And so therefore, even if something was included in the daily briefing, whether or not that's something that he, would be completely read in on, even if he did have it in front of him.
Now, this is something, isn't it, that Joe Biden is starting to seize on, the president's response to these reports. How could this play out in the electoral race?
Well, I think it does bring back into focus a question that could be, somewhat persuasive for certain voters, which is the degree to which Trump has been, I would put it this way, soft on Russia, and that has certainly been the Democrats' claim that the president hasn't stood up to Russia, the implication being that is because, Russia treated him favorably in the 2016 election. That's obviously something Trump has wholeheartedly disputed. But I think that this kind of brings that question back to the fore and has potentially the effect of, energizing the Democratic base who, this is all tied up in the same kinds of arguments that were made around impeachment. And so that's something that has the ability to energize the Democratic base. And potentially, and I think this is where it really matters, because the Democratic base has already been pretty energized, is the idea of whether or not this is something that could be persuasive to independent voters. And I don't know if we really know that yet, but that certainly would be a dynamic to watch.
And it's been interesting as this Russia story continues to unfold, and with the ongoing response to the coronavirus surge and racial tensions across the country, President Trump really seems to be leaning in on trying to drum up his base.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that, Trump is someone who, when he's, feels like his back is to the wall, he kind of goes to his, go-to move, which is really to start kind of stoking, one of his go-to moves is really to start stoking kind of racial tensions. And I think that, focusing on race issues is something that definitely does appeal to his base. The risk there, though, is that it's something that it could be a potential turnoff to more independent voters and swing voters. And so I think that is where it has the potential to backfire. But it's in some ways, not surprising that we're seeing him this week tweet, a number of things that are, critical of the Black Lives Matter movement, because that's something that, from his base's perspective, certainly would be a positive.
Bloomberg Politics Editor Kathleen Hunter, thank you, as always. Karen?
All right, Nathan, thank you. It is 6:53 on Wall Street. It's time for the Bloomberg NJIT STEM Report. It's brought to you by New Jersey Institute of Technology, providing industry partners with commercially focused research and innovation services through its New Jersey Innovation Institute. Learn more at njii.com. Now let's see what's happening in science, technology, engineering, and math. NASA has delayed the launch of its newest Mars rover yet again to the end of July at the earliest, this time for a rocket issue. If the Perseverance rover is not on its way by mid-August, it'll have to wait until 2022 when Earth and Mars are back in proper alignment. The delay alone will cost NASA close to $500 million. The chief executive officers of Facebook, Alphabet, Amazon, and Apple have agreed to testify before a congressional panel investigating competition issues in the technology industry. That's according to a spokeswoman for the U.S. House Judiciary Committee. Antitrust scrutiny of giant tech companies is accelerating. Facebook and Google both.
I'm placing an order to sell short Euro USD at the price 1.28.6 or even 7. Let's see what price I can sell. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Do the place. So let's see what's going to happen.
In New Jersey, that was supposed to start today, but that too has been postponed. And it's made a bad situation even worse for some restaurants. Tom Stewart owns Uncle Will's on New Jersey's Long Beach Island. We spoke with him at the start of the pandemic, and then this morning we circle back. Tom, tell us how you're handling the postponement of indoor dining.
John, not only were we blindsided, both tangible as well as an intangible problem. The tangible problem, of course, is businesses such as ours require several days in order to ramp up, if not several weeks. We had hired 4 or 5 new people to bring them back online to help us with the anticipated increase in business, as well as increasing our inventory, our food inventory, which, we just can't go out back and slaughter an animal. We have to actually bring in prepared food and be able to use it. So that takes several days to get going.
What do you expect this weekend?
I have absolutely no idea. Frankly, and I'm being glib here, I wouldn't put past people who are capable of making such capricious and knee-jerk decisions to start closing the beaches again. The despondency has never been higher. We had Hurricane Sandy make landfall half a mile away from here 7.5 years ago. The despondency that this community is facing now is 100% higher than having had 4 or 5 feet of water in buildings. And the biggest reason, John, is because then we knew there was an end. We knew that once we got things dried out and rebuilt and refurbished, we could get back to normalcy.
All right, Tom, good to hear your voice again. Tom Stewart of Uncle Will's Restaurant on the Jersey Shore. Best of luck. And we're going to continue to bring you stories of small businesses trying to adapt and survive in this pandemic every day at this time, right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That's your Bloomberg Small Business Report. Karen.
All right, John Tucker, thank you. Futures this morning are higher, with S&P futures up 21 points and Dow futures up 255. Bloomberg Surveillance is straight ahead with Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrell, and Lisa Abramowitz. For Nathan Hager, I'm Karen Moscow, and this is Bloomberg.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg.
Hey, I'm Robin, one of the tech experts, here to help you at Corey's PC World. I'm not just a voice on the radio.
Too late, so I will cancel this order. Okay, Euro USD order I placed before was cancelled.
PC World.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. We can replace your battery at over 700 stores and garages, or even at your home or work with our mobile experts, so you can enjoy an engine that starts first time, every time, and start enjoying the open road again.
Are we nearly there yet?
From battery replacements to tyre fittings to MOTs, there really is no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
My name is Danya. I moved to Manchester in 2010. I came from Afghanistan. The first school day was a bit tough. I had no friends, couldn't speak English, and felt a bit left out. My high school teacher was very supportive. She matched me up with friends that spoke the same language as me. Having friends gave me a lot of confidence. I felt like I'm not being left out.
Teaching. Every lesson shapes a life. Get free one-to-one support with our teacher training advisors to get one step closer to the classroom. Subject to eligibility. Search Get Into Teaching.
.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is Bloomberg Radio.
No one at this point, analysts, companies, strategists, portfolio managers, has a great sense for what earnings will be in 2020 or in 2021.
You have a Fed that has literally looked into a television camera and said, we're just printing the money.
It's not about the discussion about whether there's going to be a recovery or not. Let's not confuse bounce with recovery.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrell, and Lisa Abramowitz.
From New York City. 8:30 for our audience worldwide. Good morning, good morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance. On this Payrolls Thursday, we're live on Bloomberg TV and radio alongside Tom Keene, together with Lisa Brabbits. I'm Jonathan Ferro. 90 minutes away from the Payrolls report, and one word already, the buzzword, Tom Keene: misclassification, misclassification.
Put in the 6 o'clock script, John. It's so important. This is the oddest unemployment report we're ever going to see. It's also the oddest employed report we're ever going to see. John, it's a complete, total mystery, not only to you, me, and Lisa. It's a total mystery to Lawrence Kudlow.
Catching up with Larry Kudlow a little bit later this morning, 10 a.m. Eastern, for the response from the White House. Lisa, the estimates, we've poured through them all week. The median, a little north of 3 million. The range, though, is absolutely remarkable. The highest positive 9 million, the lowest 500K, and somewhere in between. I don't think anybody's really got a clue what is about to come at 8:30 Eastern.
And then there's a question of what it means with respect to the weeks after the data came in which case we saw these close downs continue throughout the nation in the face of an escalating pandemic. 8:30 a.m. we get that data dump, both the initial jobless claims as well as the June jobs report. We'll be parsing through that. Also, what I'm looking at, very much interested to hear what Larry Kudlow has to say with you, John Farrow, today at 10 a.m. Eastern. Do not miss it on Bloomberg Television, where he will give the party line from the White House and how to deal with the pandemic and the economic crisis, not different things. And then today at 11:30 a.m. we get the first public comments from President Trump this week. He is going to give a discussion at the White House at the Spirit of America Showcase. Very interesting to hear, again, his new approach to the pandemic as a mounting chorus of Republicans say you need to deal with this differently, maybe even wear a mask, John.
And Lisa, I think the president all in now, apparently, on wearing masks, speaking to Fox Business in the last 24 hours. Tom Keene, the number one question for me after this payrolls report, and for many others as well: what does it mean for the fiscal effort over the next 30 days in the United States of America? That's going to be the question a lot of people ask themselves when that data drops.
When all the cross currents are done, I think you're right, John. I think that's really what we're going to coalesce around, is a political urgency within the election. And of course, with the July 4th kickoff, you know, the election changes on July 4th and into the weekend. And it used to be you'd go to the conventions. But I agree the coalescence here is going to be around the fiscal debate. There's a lot of other things going on, John. To our conversation yesterday with John Bolton, that Gang of 8 meeting on the Hill that was yesterday is now today, and that will be a most interesting meeting to set the tone for the weekend into the Sunday talk shows.
We'll touch base with Kevin Cerillion in around about 20 minutes' time right here on Bloomberg Radio and on Bloomberg TV. In your equity market, with positive 23 points on the S&P, we have had a really nice week of gains, and we add some weight to it, up 0.7%. We have a wonderful lineup of guests on Bloomberg Surveillance this morning, and we begin with the brilliant Priya Misra of TD Securities. Priya, for me, for many other people, I think we've got a question on our mind, just how useful this data will be at 8:30. How useful will it be for you?
So as a rate strategist, I would say labor market data is always important. But this one, you know, I think we just can't extrapolate from this payroll report. Just as we couldn't extrapolate from the depths of the weakness in April, I think this one is less useful because, as you know, you've talked about misclassification. We don't know how the reopening is impacting this. I would imagine that the number looks good. We're looking for 4 million because of the reopening plus the PPP impact. But once the reopening is over, the pent-up demand is out. You know, what does the other side look like? And, you know, can you extrapolate from these gains? I would say no. In fact, the Fed is telling us that they want good numbers. They are not extrapolating from any of this data. So I would say it's less important. I'm really watching the rise in the COVID cases. I'm watching what the Fed commentaries about. I think all that is probably more important than the number today at 8:30.
Priya, I think you're dead on this, but I really take issue with the idea it's just about the jobs report. And to me, the claims data, the high-frequency Thursday data that we always get, the claims data, am I right, Priya, that's just as important as a jobs report?
Exactly, yeah, and we're having the super payroll Thursday with everything out at the same time. I would say that the initial claims, now that's also got some issues because PPP, for example, had impacted that data, but at least it's more higher frequency. Some of the other numbers that we look at, the home base, which is small business employment, it's actually leveling off. So if that shows up in initial claims, I think even if we get a blockbuster payroll report, but you get a weakening in initial claims, which confirms the home-based data, I think we'll get more nervous about the recovery.
Priya, does any of this really matter? I mean, not to get philosophical on this Thursday. Usually I save the philosophy for Fridays, but we're not going to have Friday. We're having a situation where markets are treating good news as very good news, indicating perhaps a V-shaped recovery. And bad news is also not so bad because it just means more fiscal and monetary support. Is this the right way to look at it?
I think given the uncertainty out there, I'm a little surprised at some of the complacency. But I think the hope is, and I think, whether fiscal or monetary, the talk has been we're building a bridge to the other side. The problem is we don't know how long this bridge will be. Clearly, there is need for another fiscal package. Our view is that we will get something by the end of July. So that bridge needs to keep extending. And then what does the other side look like? This is the part where I think the Fed has been saying that there could be structural damage happening right now. I think some risk markets are assuming that we'll go back to the world that existed in Jan or Feb. I'm very skeptical. I think the fact that these cases are growing is actually affecting business confidence, consumer confidence. So I think the other side might look a little different, in which case, there may be a moment of reckoning for at least some asset classes, at least in some sectors.
Priya, I hope we get a bounce in the data today. Everybody does. What I worry about is that bounce shapes the composition, the effort in Washington. I think undoubtedly what we get in July this month from Washington is some kind of package on the fiscal side. But if you take today's payrolls report to shape that package, you're making a big mistake, given what we're seeing in states across this country, either pausing or reversing reopening plans. And Priya, I just wonder how dated the data is today that comes out at 8:30.
Right. Yeah, I think it's dated, number one, because it's in the context of the reopening. So there was that pent-up demand. As businesses reopened, they had to hire. Plus, you had the PPP program that was incentivizing employers to hire, but that's running out. Even if that gets extended, it's still a temporary measure. So, yes, I am concerned that, if the number is good, then some of the pressure on Washington will decline. But I think there is pressure happening from the other side, right? From the rise in cases, there's clearly a healthcare response, but there's also a fiscal response. Perhaps stimulus checks will be given out. But, we're talking $1 trillion, which I know it's a big number, but it's not as large as I think what could have been if we were not reopening. But yeah, I think, we're probably going to get something for the state relief. I think the states, it's not just about a few states now that are going to need help. So at least I think any fiscal package will have something for the states.
I think, John, this is so important. This, folks, is a changed landscape that we've seen here in the last 24 hours. Priya's mentioned it twice, John, which is the idea the debates change because the virus news has changed. John, you've got restaurants, we're going to open. No, in New York, we're going to close or stay closed. In L.A., we're going to open. No, we're not. We're going to stay closed. John, I think that has direct impact on labor confidence.
There are businesses that will need support, Tom, and there will be loss of incomes that need to be offset by the government. Priya, we still need that counter-cyclical fiscal approach from Washington, D.C. You talked about the extension to the bridge to the other side, and I share that view with you. It needs an extension. You mentioned $1 trillion. I just wonder how persistent the effort is going to need to be through 2020 and whether we will have enough support for that effort bumping up against an election. Can we keep Washington unified on the response to offset the loss of income? I think that's the big question, isn't it, Priya?
It is, yes. And I think it's kind of like world peace. Yes, everyone wants to support. The moment you get into the details of, well, what exactly will go in this package? Are you going to provide that liability waiver? Well, a lot of people are not going to want that. Are you going to provide a ton of money to states, to use wherever money is fungible? Well, the moment you get into what exactly goes into this package, that's where I think the partisan divide shows up. And we have an election coming up. So everything now has to be seen, I think, in the lens of the political, unfortunately, which side you're on. And that's going to complicate this plan. But I think, they'll find some middle ground. I just think normally whenever you're trying to get a bipartisan bill, my rule of law is that it's going to grow because you get both sides happy. But into an election, severe campaign season, very negative campaign season, I don't think you can assume that it'll be a very large package.
Priya, appreciate your time this morning. Have a good morning, won't you? And a good long weekend too. Priya Misra there of TD Securities. Lisa Brabbits, this has got to be the #1 issue for this month, what this fiscal package looks like. And I've got to say the approach so far hasn't been clear from this administration. We really need to understand what the strategy is. The president in the last 24 hours said he would support more direct payments to individuals. That's the first time I've really heard him say that with some conviction. I wonder what the follow-up is. But where we do have consensus, I think, on the administration side, is that they worry that the enhanced unemployment benefits that expired at the end of this month disincentivize going back to work. Now, I don't think you can say that the payrolls report that we got last month is an accurate indication of this economy and then at the same time say that somehow the enhanced unemployment benefits have stopped people returning to work. But I imagine that's a position they're going to try and hold through this month.
What's interesting to me is that markets are basically pricing in that there will be an extension of those enhanced unemployment benefits. If there is not a re-upping of them, I imagine that could perhaps be the trigger for that reckoning that Priya Misra and others have talked about, where you do start to see some of the fundamentals catch up with market pricing, or perhaps the other way around, John.
Questions for the White House a little bit later this morning. Good morning to you all. 10 a.m. Eastern, a little under 3 hours away. We will be catching up with National Economic Council Director Larry Kudlow right here on Bloomberg TV and on Bloomberg Radio. In your equity market, after a really nice week of gains, we add some weight to it this Thursday morning, up 25 on the S&P, up 0.8%. From New York City this morning, alongside Tom Keene, together with Lisa Brabbits, I'm Jonathan Ferro, heard on Bloomberg Radio, seen on Bloomberg TV. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Now let's see what else is going on around the world. Here with the latest headlines is Amy Morris. Good morning, Amy.
Good morning, Tom. For the first time, daily coronavirus cases have passed 50,000 nationwide, the highest level yet in the U.S. since the pandemic. Many of those caseloads are surging across the South, including Arizona and Texas, which hit record numbers of daily cases. And in Florida, where masks are now required in Miami-Dade County, Pennsylvania will require masks now, too. New Jersey saw a one-day uptick in the numbers, and that got Governor Phil Murphy's attention.
Even one knucklehead bar can ruin it for everyone. It only takes one match to start a wildfire, and it only takes one infected bar goer to ignite a COVID-19 flare-up that then shuts everything else all back down.
He says people can easily undo all of the progress they've made. Both New York City and the state of New Jersey holding off on reopening indoor dining for now. More than a dozen potential vaccines are in the human trial stage, but Dr. Ashish Jha, director of Harvard's Global Health Institute, tells ABC that it's more important to be thorough than fast.
If we sort of cut corners on those things, I don't think we're going to create the confidence people need. So I think we can get there, but we're going to have to do it. We're going to have to do it right.
He says it'll still be months before a vaccine is ready for the public. House lawmakers passed a bill imposing sanctions on banks doing business with Chinese officials involved in cracking down on pro-democracy protesters in Hong Kong. That measure could head to the president's desk as soon as today. And the defense authorization bill unanimously passed the House Armed Services Committee, including that provision renaming military bases that are named for Confederate generals. President Trump has already threatened to veto the Senate's version of that bill. Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seizechange.
Influential conversation.
In line with government guidelines, face coverings are now compulsory on public transport. At Asda, you can get a 4-pack of Prima disposable face coverings for £2.80, or a 2-pack of washable face coverings from £2.50. Asda, we're all in this together. Selected stores subject to availability.
I was offered one. I was offered one. Were you?
Yeah, I was offered one too.
1 2 1 2. I was offered one.
I was offered one. Don't take our word for it. 9 out of 10 people said they were offered a great value deal with O2. Get yours today, in-store, online, or by phone.
I was offered one too. O2 Retail Exit Survey 309 of 348 agreed with the statement. O2 offered me a great value deal. For full verification, see o2.co.uk/terms.
London. Toolstation are here to help get your job safely started and finished. With over 60 branches within the M25. All open with social distancing and contactless click and collect from 5 minutes. And with 20,000 top trade quality products to choose from. Order online now for collection in London branches and get £5 off when you spend over £30 with the code LON530. So, get your job started at toolstation.com. Terms and conditions apply.
In terms of the Trump presidency, look, it's just another day at the office. That's the way it works. Every day is a new day. Every story is a new story. What you said yesterday is interesting, but doesn't necessarily dictate what you say today. What it tells the Russians is we are in disarray and ripe for this kind of provocation, not just in Afghanistan, but in many, many other places around the world.
Ambassador Bolton joining Bloomberg Surveillance live on Bloomberg TV and on Bloomberg Radio. Good morning to you all from New York City. Alongside Tom Keene and Lisa Bravitz, I'm Jonathan Ferro. On this Payrolls Thursday, in your equity market, we rally into the jobs print, up 25 on the S&P, up 0.8% and adding some weight to the 3.6% gain, weekly gain on the S&P 500 so far this week. Elsewhere in the bond market, last week Treasury yields lower on a 10-year by around about 5 basis points. We push higher on the week so far and add another basis point to your 10-year yield. A 10-year maturity, your yield there 0.687%. On the week so far, the dollar just a little bit softer, a little bit weaker in the FX market. You see that story emerging as well. The euro advances. That is a weaker dollar, Tom Keene, against the bulk of G10. 1 hour and 12 minutes away from the payrolls report.
Well, the payrolls report, and as Priya Misra said, John, I'm watching the claims and the continuing claims just as much on this odd Thursday as anyone else. But Kevin Cirilli will be watching in Washington to follow on from our interview with Ambassador Bolton is what the Gang of 8 does. He's here now to explain to us who the Gang of 8 is and why President Trump will focus on them today. Kevin, who are those 8 figures on Capitol Hill?
Well, this is a bipartisan group of lawmakers, and what they're really going to be figuring out precisely is what happened with the Russia bounty and what the U.S. foreign policy ought to be moving forward. Now, in Washington, D.C., on the issues pertaining to national security, whether it relates to Russia, whether it relates to China, there often is, Tom, a consensus behind the scenes that builds. It doesn't get much play publicly, especially in these polarized cable news times. So I think that in terms of what's going on as Russia President Vladimir Putin continues to firm up power for nearly another decade plus, the U.S. foreign policy wing of the bipartisan type of lawmakers in Congress are also trying to figure out some type of strategy as well.
Yeah, I believe Putin, folks, on an age basis with the plebiscite yesterday is out to 83 years old. He'll be in power within Russia. Kevin, yesterday, Ambassador Bolton, I thought was really something in agreeing with Susan Rice that he would burst into the Oval Room office to brief the president on these Russian matters. Is the staff of the president going to burst into the Oval Office today?
Well, no, but look, I think what was so fascinating about that interview yesterday was it really did offer a firsthand look inside of the former NSA director's perception of what it was like to work inside of that White House as it relates to foreign policy. And beyond that, it was fascinating. Absolutely fascinating to hear from John Bolton in agreement with Susan Rice. I mean, that is something, you know, I think we always, you know, keep up with the dizzying pace of news coming out of Washington, but that was something that I think folks should just take a minute to let that sink in, because up until yesterday, that is something that we never thought we would have heard.
We are hearing more about some bipartisan efforts when it comes to, as you were talking about, news and reports of the Russian bounties on the heads of American soldiers. How much of a bipartisan effort is there in terms of re-upping the enhanced unemployment benefits? We've talked a lot about this. The market is certainly counting on this. And domestically, even if we get a big jobs beat in about an hour time, we still are looking at a hugely damaged labor market.
Well, Lisa, you know this better than anybody in terms of the crunching the numbers on the economic indicators, because, Lisa, when you look at how these states, not just in terms of the unemployment benefits, but when you look at how these states are having to issue more closures, whether it's in Florida, Arizona, California, these are some Republican parts of the country where there are many, many Republicans who are saying reopen the economy and let's put people back to work, and that'll take care of the recession that we're in. However, with all of these closures, it's only adding the impetus for there to be another round of economic stimulus. And when you've got, you know, $130+ million left over in the bank account for some of these loans for small businesses, and now joint Democrats and Republicans saying that they want to be able to put that into Main Street, yeah, I do think that there is some bipartisanship. And a final note on that point, you know, look no further than across the pond. When you've got Boris Johnson, you know, passing a major infrastructure package, he's a pretty conservative global world leader. That could be actually the roadmap for President Trump to follow in the fall here if he wants to get infrastructure on board.
Yeah, I think the fiscal hawks on both sides of the Atlantic are well and truly gone, for now at least. Kevin, help me translate this. The president was asked by Fox in the last 24 hours, do you support another round of direct payments to Americans? And he said the following. He said, I support it, but it has to be done properly, and I support actually larger numbers than the Democrats, but it's got to be done properly. What does doing it properly actually mean?
Two things. First and foremost, it means making sure that the states that are heavily impacted by this are paying to individuals who truthfully cannot get back to work, and not because they don't have a choice. And the second point here is what the president sees, Jonathan, is that the states that are actually the hardest hit by not being able to reopen are actually Republican states. And that has really thrown a wrench into the political calculations here, because the president knows that many of these states that cannot reopen are states that he also needs to win back in order to get reelected. And finally, I would just note, you know, when you talk to folks at the Labor Department, as we all have, you know, it's quite remarkable because of how much, again, that concern of issuing some helicopter cash to people at a time when they really need it, and coupled with this debate of whether or not people want to go back to work.
Kevin Cerruti down in Washington. Kevin, ahead of the long weekend, always appreciate it. You have a good long weekend, won't you, sir? Tom, this has got to be one of the big issues for the next package down in Washington, D.C. States don't have the same capability when it comes to borrowing as, say, the federal government. And the big worry, I think, for many people is that as these states suffer, they start to introduce state-level austerity. And that is not what you want, Tom, in an economic downturn. And it's certainly not what you want in an economy struggling to reopen.
You got to believe we'll see that, John, in the next 10 days, literally the next 10 days. Joachim Fels of PIMCO yesterday was spellbinding, John, in terms of the urgency here to help the states. He put a $1 trillion all-in ticket on the new set of aid that will be needed.
1 hour and 5 minutes away, the payrolls report coming up right here on Bloomberg Surveillance. We keep saying it, the wide range of estimates is absolutely phenomenal. The median estimate just a little north of 3 million. The low is positive 500K. The high is positive 9 million. The conclusion is there is a lot of confusion, a lack of visibility over just how quickly we're bouncing back and how well we're snapping back. In your equity market this morning, up 25 on the S&P 500, advancing 0.8%. From New York, alongside Tom Keene and Lisa Bravitz, I'm Jonathan Ferro. On Bloomberg TV, on Bloomberg Radio, this is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Elite advisory firms rely on BNY Mellon's Pershing to meet the needs of their most complex clients. Karen Novak, Chief Operating Officer at Pershing Advisor Solutions, explains how.
At BNY Mellon's Pershing, we bring customized insights and strategies to help you grow your advisory business and stay on the leading edge. We can support the needs of your most sophisticated clients with a full range of investment and wealth management solutions, from access to private banking to consolidated bank and brokerage custody. Learn why so many of the largest advisory firms turn to us for the financial strength and high-touch service that BNY Mellon's Pershing can provide. Are you well positioned to stand out from your competition?
Learn more at Pershing.com or call 800-445-4467. Brokerage custody provided by Pershing LLC and other services provided by Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC. Both members of FINRA and SIPC. Private banking and bank custody provided by BNY Mellon NA. Member FDIC.
This is in line with government guidelines. Face coverings are now compulsory on public transport. At Asda, you can get a 4-pack of Prima disposable face coverings for £2.80, or a 2-pack of washable face coverings from £2.50. Asda, we're all in this together. Selected stores subject to availability.
And action.
I was offered one.
Cut. That's not on the script.
I was offered one. Get in.
Ladies and gentlemen, I was offered one.
Come, boy. I was offered one. Don't take our word for it. 9 out of 10 people said they were offered a great value deal with O2. Get yours today, in-store, online, or by phone.
I was offered one too. O2 Retail Exit Survey 309 of 348 agreed with the statement. O2 offered me a great value deal. For full verification, see o2.co.uk/terms.
London. Toolstation are here to help get your job safely started and finished. With over 60 branches within the M25. All open with social distancing and contactless click and collect from 5 minutes. And with 20,000 top trade quality products to choose from. Order online now for collection in London branches and get £5 off when you spend over £30 with the code LON530. So, get your job started at toolstation.com. Terms and conditions apply.
Should your kids go back to school? Ask Andrea. She's a teacher.
We're doing everything we can to keep the children safe and happy at school, which is why it's great that more of those who can are coming back. Not only for their education, but for their overall well-being too. It gives them a routine, helps develop their social skills, and they get to see their friends too.
If your child is eligible, they should return to school. The government is working towards getting all pupils back in September. Stay alert, control the virus, save lives.
On this Payrolls Thursday, this is Bloomberg Surveillance for our audience worldwide, live on Bloomberg Radio and TV, alongside Tom Keene and Lisa Bravitz. I'm Jonathan Ferro, 1 hour away from the jobs report in America, with equity futures up nicely, up 23 on the S&P 500. We advanced 0.75% and add a little bit more weight to the weekly rally so far, ahead of the long weekend stateside. In the bond market, Treasuries set up as follows: yields bleeding just a little bit higher, up by not even a basis point on a 30-year. On 10s, we are higher to 0.68%, but it's a really mild move, Tom Keene, in the bond market. 1 hour away from a payrolls report. With a median estimate, I've got to say, Tom, how much should you read into a median estimate when the range of estimates is so wide going into this one?
Nothing. Folks, this is a different jobs report today. We'll give you full coverage at 8:30. We'll go on from there with a lot of good conversation. Again, the claims data coming out as well. And what we're going to do right now is we're not going to go big picture. You can do that with Ellen Zentner of Morgan Stanley. Far more important, it's a Thursday nerd alert. We're going to go nerd with Ellen Zentner and really talk about minutia of this historic report. Ellen, your team has been great about slicing and dicing, misclassification, this, that, and the other thing. What does the new bout of virus delay mean to any of your forecasting? How have you had to amend literally in the last 10 days?
Yeah, so I think we're really having to go back again, as we did when we were going through the shutdowns. We're going to have to go back again and do this on a state-by-state basis. And simply because you've got activity slowing and falling off in the states that have had to now roll back some of their opening. You've got states in the Northeast, mainly, that are still holding up the national numbers because we're still opening. But even there, we've seen the reaction from the New Jersey governor, where they've rolled back the opening of restaurants. That may be delayed then in places like New York, because we're seeing these other states as a shining example of what happens when you open too early. And so all of this data, including the June payroll report that we're going to be getting later this morning, all of this data is backwards looking. And what we have to understand is that we've already gone through the sharpest part of this rebound because of pent-up demand coming through, but that is not going to be sustained. And so this is great news. We think we brought back more than 12 million workers in June, offset by 7 million job losses, but another 12 million workers came back. But that is going to slow at a time when initial jobless claims have been stuck at 1.5 million per week. And at some point, that starts to overwhelm the amount of people coming back to the labor force.
Right. And folks, that's that juxtaposition of claims and unemployment that you're going to see at 8:30, and we'll pull a rabbit out of our hat there and try to do all the different analysis we can. Ellen, the summary to me is simple. I look at my incoming mailbox, and it's thunderous, the emails I've gotten this week from people around this nation who say, look, the suits and ties on TV have it wrong. It's a lot worse out here than what you people are talking about. What is that U6 number going to be? I mean, we don't even survey it at Bloomberg. Is 22% now. Are you looking at a 25% U6? Is that feasible?
So U6 is going to remain extraordinarily high. So the full measure of underemployment, it is moving in the right direction, but that tells a more clear underlying picture of the pain in the economy from COVID-19 moving through. And you're absolutely right. And we heard these similar concerns after 2008, after the financial crisis. What are you economists talking about? That we're in recovery. This does not feel like a recovery. I heard that all the way through to 2014, after the financial crisis. That's the time that consumer confidence finally got back to pre-crisis levels. I'm hearing something similar. It's very difficult, Tom, because we sit on a tiny island of Manhattan. Well, right now I've escaped to the countryside in upstate New York, but we sit in a tiny island, and it's a bubble, and it doesn't represent what's going on in the broader economy. And I can't even tell you the number of emails I, too, have gotten about the weekly supplemental unemployment insurance benefits that are due to expire at the end of this month. It's nail-biting for these folks that are waiting to see how they can budget around whether that expires, whether it steps down, what happens to that.
There's a worry that maybe if we get a decent bounce again today, Ellen, that it really shapes the fiscal effort down in Washington and we don't get the composition right. There's going to be a ton of quirks in this labour market report in 55 minutes' time. Ellen, we'd love your help to work through some of them. Help us understand the quirks in the unemployment rate, the misclassifications that they got wrong in the last month or so, how that could impact the unemployment rate. Help us with the wage number as well and how that might reshape the wrong way in the coming hour as well.
Well, you've got some cross currents there, right? So the misclassification. So when people go out into the field with a survey for households, which is where the unemployment rate is taken from, the survey of households, not the survey of companies, and they say, were you unemployed, and if so, why? And then they classify them into different buckets. And they've been told to classify, if they're out of a job because of COVID, to classify them differently so that they are stripped out of that unemployment rate. And because of that, because they're not, so they're, right, stripped out of that calculation. If you were to count them properly as unemployed, then the unemployment rate as reported would be much higher. I think that regardless of whether policymakers specifically understand that nuance or not, they're going to be going home over the July 4th holiday. They're going to be going out across the country into normal land and see that normal isn't good. And I think that the media, which is doing a great job of covering the problems in the states that have opened up too early with accelerating cases, that is what they're going to be hearing from the most, not this data. On the flip side of the unemployment rate being higher than what's being reported, average hourly earnings we think are going to decline 1.25% month over month. Now, average hourly earnings, so that on the flip side doesn't look great at all. But it's all compositional. It's simply because we've gone through the bulk of the layoffs of the service sector, lower wage paid employees. And the bizarre thing in the composition is that as those come out of being counted, their low wages are no longer dragging down the overall. So now that that distortion has ended, then average hourly earnings are now falling. And so it just, you really can't, you've got to throw all this data out the window because it is so distorted. What we know from the labor market report is that the labor market is in rough shape. That's what we know.
Yeah.
And that more help is needed.
Well, Ellen, the composition is where I wanted to go, this idea that because this data is so messy, people are throwing it out and just trying to go for a bigger rethink of the U.S. labor market. I was struck by a Bloomberg Businessweek story saying that the minimum wage currently in this nation is 70% in real terms what it was in 1968. And this comes as a growing proportion of the labor force is concentrated in the lowest paying industries. What are you hoping to see? And why is it important from an economics perspective for policymakers to come up with, whether it's an infrastructure spending plan or something, to rejigger the composition of the workforce perhaps and inject something on Main Street that feels perhaps a bit better than what Congress members are going to be hearing when they go back home this weekend?
Yes, I think so. You bring up infrastructure. It feels like a career-long dream of mine to get infrastructure spending, massive infrastructure spending from Congress. I don't think we get it this year. I think it's something that's used on the campaign trail. It's a hot topic of what can be delivered depending on, vote for me, I will deliver big infrastructure. And you're going to hear that from both candidates. That is a 2021 story. It's a story for, look, once we've passed this emergency funding support packages, let's talk about how we can support the economy going forward in a way that puts us on track for higher potential GDP, higher productivity, which means higher nominal wages, and lower unemployment. And those are big packages like infrastructure that come with very large multipliers, meaning they have a very large economic impact on the economy with very long tails. But that's next year's story. I think Chair Powell said it best after the most recent FOMC meeting, saying that our goal is to get back to that 3.5% unemployment rate that we had before COVID-19 hit. as fast as humanly possible, which means there's not just more for fiscal policy to do. We have to lean most heavily on that, but there's more for monetary policy to do as well. Getting that unemployment rate as low as possible is the way that you get into the cracks of the economy, the cracks of the labor market, the cracks of households in order to lift all boats. And everyone has to be focused on that as the end goal.
Ellen, absolutely fantastic to catch up with you 50 minutes ahead of the payrolls report, and brilliant work over at Morgan Stanley over the last several months with the whole of the research team. Ellen Zentner there of Morgan Stanley on the payrolls report out in 50 minutes time. Some really important points about how useless this data will be at 8:30 Eastern, Lisa, particularly on the composition of the workers coming back. The low wage segment of the jobs market came off in that really ugly jobs report that we had a couple of months ago, which actually put upward pressure on the wages. You've got to reverse engineer that. That's what's expected at 8:30 Eastern, Lisa.
A lot of the data is increasingly being dismissed as messy, and one of the most interesting reports that I saw overnight was from Bloomberg Economics taking a look at inflation data that's come out, saying the CPI figures the Fed looks at are way too low because when you rejigger the composition of what we're actually buying in the pandemic, it's groceries. It's things that are the basic necessities, and the inflation there has been so much greater, and this has disproportionately hit on the lowest income workers because those expenses take on a greater proportion of their monthly bills. To me, these types of rejiggering of the data are so important, sort of these less concrete data points that really color the entire labor and economic picture of the United States.
There's a ton of pain out there, Lisa, and Tom Keene will get a sense of that in around about 50 minutes' time. I think we also have to reflect on the massive surprise, Tom, that we had last month and whether there's huge scope for another big surprise, one way or another, in 50 minutes.
John, you're right, and I'll go there, and I'm humbled by it, and a lot of the grizzled pros I know were really humbled by the retail miscalculation. But quickly, John, I'm looking at claims and continuing claims at high-frequency data.
I would agree with you, Tom. A lot of data to pour over in around about 50 minutes right here on Bloomberg. With equity futures up 25 on the S&P 500, we advance 0.8% from New York. This is Bloomberg.
Now let's see what else is going on around the world. Here with the latest headlines is Amy Morris. Good morning, Amy.
Good morning, Tom. We're seeing 50,000 new coronavirus cases each day in the U.S. It's never been this high before. Many of those caseloads surging across the South, including Arizona and Texas, which have each reported record numbers of new cases. This weekend, Independence Day, will look much different to most Americans. New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio says it should mean even more.
We are fighting shoulder to shoulder in a fight for freedom from the coronavirus. And the people of this city have been earning every day more and more of that freedom.
He's decided to delay allowing indoor dining at restaurants to ensure the virus doesn't make a resurgence. New Jersey also delaying reopening indoor dining. And the governor there says it's easy to become complacent.
No one, absolutely no one, especially our younger residents, can be lulled into complacency and think it's okay to crowd around bars without any regard for those around us. That is how we backslide. That's how we get pushed off our road back.
Governor Phil Murphy urging people to keep wearing masks. Russian President Vladimir Putin won a resounding endorsement of his bid to extend his 2-decade-long rule potentially to 2036, even as some polls show his approval ratings near historic lows. The White House says there will be a strong response if it's shown that Russia offered the Taliban bounties to kill U.S. troops in Afghanistan. Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg.
With the Bloomberg Business of Sports Report, I'm Charlie Pellet. The Buffalo Bills have advised season ticket holders there is a chance games may be played without fans this season because of the coronavirus pandemic. With that in mind, the team began emailing season ticket holders this week to give them the chance to opt out of their commitment for this season with an option to return for the 2021 season. They will maintain their account seniority and seat location. Hong Kong's traders and bankers will be missing out this year on one of that city's city's biggest parties, the Cathay Pacific HSBC Hong Kong Sevens. It's a 3-day rugby tournament that has been canceled because of the coronavirus for the first time since its debut in 1976. Lululemon Athletica is buying Mirror. It's a producer of in-home fitness equipment for $500 million. Home fitness products have gained in popularity as the coronavirus pandemic has shuttered gyms. And that's the Bloomberg Business of Sports Report. I'm Charlie Pellett.
Jenny Liss, Jewish communal leader and philanthropist, talks about why she chose the Jewish Communal Fund for her family's charitable giving.
For a lot of people, it would be the convenience factor. I don't have to track anything.
If charitable giving is an important part of your life, JCF can help you organize your philanthropy with our donor-advised fund. A fund can be established with a minimum tax-deductible contribution of $5,000. Make grants to your favorite charities, and JCF handles all the administration and reporting.
At the year end, our board awards community grants from fees and endowment income to UJ's annual campaign. We also make gifts to specific organizations, the elderly, Holocaust survivors, the hungry. The fact that we come together as a community at the end of the year to build community, that's what makes us different.
Get better at giving back. To find out more about JCF's impact, visit jcfny.org and download the Giving Report. JCF, we have a gift for giving.
Global News 24 hours.
Different adapts, different overcomes, different keeps moving, different keeps thinking, different stays connected, different never stops dreaming. The University of Northampton invites you to a virtual open day for a taste of all the benefits of studying with us from this September. Search University of Northampton Virtual Open Days. It's the future, but different.
Hey, I'm Robin, one of the tech experts here to help you at Curry's PC World. I'm not just a voice on the radio. You can now come into your local store and talk tech with a human being like me. Yay! Just the news you needed this afternoon. We've put all the right measures in place to help you again safely in your local Staples Corner store. The tech experts are back in town, so come in and talk laptops and washing machines or fridges and TVs. And welcome back to your local Curry's PC World.
In line with government guidelines, face coverings are now compulsory on public transport. At Asda, you can get a 4-pack of Prima disposable face coverings for £2.80, or a 2-pack of washable face coverings from £2.50. Asda, we're all in this together. Selected stores subject to availability.
London. Toolstation are here to help get your job safely started and finished, with over 60 branches within the M25. All open with social distancing and contactless click and collect from 5 minutes. And with 20,000 top trade quality products to choose from. Order online now for collection in London branches and get £5 off when you spend over £30 with the code LON530. So, get your job started at toolstation.com. Terms and conditions apply.
I'm all for masks. I think masks are good. I would wear, if I were in a group of people and I was close.
You would wear one?
Oh, I would. Oh, I have. I mean, people have seen me wearing one. I have no problem with that. I think, and if people feel good about it, they should do it.
The President of the United States with Fox News in the last 24 hours as the reopening process has stalled, even reversed in several states, many states across America. The rhetoric has shifted. From New York City this morning, good morning to you all. Alongside Tom Keane and Lisa Brammitz, I'm Jonathan Ferro, live on Bloomberg TV and on Bloomberg Radio, counting you down to a payrolls report 42 minutes away, with equity futures near session highs up 25 points, Tom Keane. We advance 0.8%.
A nice lift to the market, John, no question about that. Right now, and this is when we invented Bloomberg surveillance, what we wanted to do more than anything. You just got a class from Ellen Zentner of Morgan Stanley on the dynamics of this 8:30 report. Now we take a bigger view from 60,000 feet, and we can do that with Betsy Stevenson. To say she's at Michigan completely understates her impact on the economic policy analysis of this nation. She's at the top of the pile, and we welcome her this morning. Betsy, what is the most urgent need right now, the first Wednesday after November? We're going to get through an election, and I don't care who wins. What's going to be the most urgent policy prescription?
Well, the most urgent policy prescription is going to be making sure that states survive their massive revenue shortfall. What happened in the last recession in 2008 was the states revenue shortfalls led to a massive wave of layoffs at the state and local government level, and that helped prolong the recession. We're on track for that to happen in the United States. So even if everybody gets pulled back to their jobs due to coronavirus, we're going to see layoffs at that state and local level that are dragging things down.
Betsy, when people heard you were going to be on, I got a whole bunch of emails, and I know John wants to talk about the fiscal package and that, and Lisa as well. I want to talk to you about the number one conversation I hear right now about America's parents. When are we going to get an economic policy prescription for child care? We seem to be the only nation in the world, the developed world, that can't do this right. Can you explain why that is?
I can't explain why it is, but I can say that, if there's a silver lining that comes out of all of this, I think it's realizing that childcare is a national issue. It's not.
I'm placing an order to sell short British pound. The price I'm looking 125, 146.
Countries in the world will be stronger for it.
Betsy, as a mom, I can personally say it is a very important thing to get kids back to school in order to improve efficiency. Betsy, I do want to get a sense from you, given the fact that we are facing a very messy slew of data that should show a great deal of improvement just by virtue of the reopening that we saw in a number of states. Can you talk about the persistent unemployment, the structural changes in the labor market that you're observing that you don't want to see lost in some of the improvements that we are seeing and going to potentially continue to see as people adapt a little bit more to the virus?
So I think people have to be really, really careful when they're looking at these reports. We have never seen tens of millions of people laid off temporarily en masse before. And what we're seeing is, and we're going to see today, is a bunch of people being called back to their jobs. And that's great. But what we need to worry about are the people who are permanently losing jobs. That got completely lost in May's employment report. Everybody was so excited that we saw.
Okay, it's executed. I'm holding Euro USD at 125, 146. So let's change it to red color. Okay, and let's follow. Let's see how much profit I will get from this.
Income struggles, but you've got a job to go back to, versus getting up in the morning and thinking, I don't even know what kind of job I'm going to have. I don't know how I'm going to get back to work. I don't know how I'm going to apply for work. That kind of permanent job destruction, it takes years to come back from. And we're just now getting a sense of how much permanent damage has been done to the economy. And even in the good news today, my guess is we're going to learn that there's been more permanent damage done than we knew last month.
Betsy, can you quantify that damage that you're talking about in terms of where the year will end with the unemployment rate, as well as the percentage of Americans permanently out of the workforce?
Yeah, so my guess, I mean, if we're looking towards the end of the year, towards December, you can't really say anything right now because, the first rule of virus economics, as the great economist Austin Goolsbee keeps saying, is the virus is the boss. So we're seeing surges right now. That's likely to lead to more layoffs. So it's hard for me to predict because I have to predict the virus plus the labor market. Given that, let me say, I would be surprised if we had unemployment that was below 9% by the end of the year. And I think that getting those 9% of people back to work is going to be a real slog. And, a best case scenario is we get everybody back to work by early 2023. That's my best case scenario. So we really do have a long ways to go here, and we shouldn't get overly excited by the news we're going to see in the report today.
Betsy, appreciate your time this morning. It's valuable, so thank you for giving it to us. Betsy Stevenson there, former Labour Department Chief Economist. Tom Keane, that is the #1 issue for this labour market into year-end. Does not matter how bullish you are, how quickly you think we will recover. The consensus overwhelmingly agrees that at the end of this year, and this is a Fed forecast as well, we get towards year-end and we're still around 9-10% unemployment, and it's not good enough.
Right.
And once you get there, that's when the slog is going to begin. And what we're seeing right now is just a mechanical bounce back in the data. You go from shutdown to reopen, you bounce back. The real slog starts once we get to the other side of the summer, and that recovery will be a whole lot slower.
Yeah, there's any number of ways of looking at this, John, and we don't have the time to, wax philosophical about it. The bottom line for me, John, is there are some optimistic houses out there. There are houses looking at a V-shaped recovery, but the recent virus overlay, all of a sudden, John, you're not out to the third week of July, or dare I say the third week of August. You have labor plans and family plans beginning to be framed for October and January of next year. That's what's new.
Lisa, this has been the story over the last 3-4 months. April became May, May became June, June became July, July becomes August, etc., etc. And as Tom points out, all of a sudden you're in fall and still struggling to normalize.
Yeah, well, and to the point that Tom was making about schools, we don't know when they're going to reopen. How can people get back to work, and how can we resume any sort of normalcy if everyone's kids are trying to do their schoolwork from home, which means trying to keep them away from video games, John?
I imagine that's a personal issue with Lisa Bravis right now. From Tom Keane and Lisa Bravis, I'm Jonathan Ferro. On this Payrolls Thursday this morning, good morning. This is Bloomberg Radio and Bloomberg TV. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Hey, y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here.
Hey, I'm Robin, one of the tech experts here to help you at Curry's PC World. I'm not just a voice on the radio. You can now come into your local store and talk tech with a human being like me. Just the news you needed this afternoon. We've put all the right measures in place to help you again safely in your local Staples Corner store. The tech experts are back in town. So come in and see if that fridge can hold enough for your hungry household. And welcome back to your local Curry's PC World.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Thursday afternoon by the scruff of the neck. Ignore this gloomy weather and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
If you can build that flat-pack wardrobe without looking at the instructions, you've still got it. If you can manage 5 keepy uppies on your first go, you've without question still got it. If you can toss a pancake to the ceiling and not let it hit the floor, surely you've still got it. And if you can just about fit into those jeans you bought 5 years ago, you've definitely still got it. Brute, still got it.
London. Toolstation are here to help get your job safely started and finished, with over 60 branches within the M25. All open with social distancing and contactless click and collect from 5 minutes. And with 20,000 top trade quality products to choose from. Order online now for collection in London branches and get £5 off when you spend over £30 with the code LON530. So, get your job started at toolstation.com. Terms and conditions apply.
The big Volkswagen event is now on. If you're after an approved used Volkswagen, for a limited time, you can buy one with 2 years warranty, 2 years MOT cover, 2 years roadside assistance, and 2 services all included at 8.9% APR representative. Hello, sir. Do any take your fancy?
I need to sit down.
The big Volkswagen event. With every type of car on offer, you may have trouble choosing.
with Solutions Personal Contract Plan until 12th of July. At participating retailers on used Volkswagens aged between 90 days and 60 months only. Indemnities may be required. Warranty valid for vehicles up to 100,000 miles at activation. MOT cover is up to 2 years and is underwritten by UK General Insurance Limited. Volkswagen Finance. Contact your local retailer.
Whether you're dreaming of a house the size of a football stadium or a football stadium in the back garden of your house, what you need is dream come true money. Luckily, Friday's Euro Million Super Jackpot is a massive £110 million. Now that's dream come true money. Euro Millions from the National Lottery. Play online or on the app. Estimated jackpot rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Talk about the losers in a trade war.
You benefit if you're just further away from China.
So that you can too.
What are the ramifications if she crumbles or doesn't crumble?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is Bloomberg Radio.
No one at this point, analysts, companies, strategists, portfolio managers, has a great sense for what earnings will be in 2020 or in 2021.
You have a Fed that has literally looked into a television camera and said, we're just printing the money.
It's not about the discussion about whether there's going to be a recovery or not. Let's not confuse bounce with recovery.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrell, and Lisa Abramowitz.
Good morning, everyone. Bloomberg Surveillance, Jonathan Farrell, Lisa Abramowitz, and Tom Keene. It is the most oddest jobs day ever. No question about that. You just heard Stephen Major of HSBC talk about the recovery that's out there, and it is a mystery. Already our conversations this morning have really showed the massive ambiguity we have going into 8:30 this morning, and then John's conversation with Lawrence Kudlow near the 10 o'clock, 9:50 hour as well. It is an extraordinary day, yes, an up market and some stasis in the bond market as well. But John Farrell, and we've said this all morning, it's not just about the payrolls report or the establishment survey. It's about the slew of economic data we get out today.
Well, Tom, it's also not just about the data. It's also about the reaction to it. How will the administration respond to the bounce that we're seeing in the economic data? How will it shape the fiscal effort through the next 30 days in the month of July, when quite clearly more help is needed? My personal worry, Tom, and I share it with many others as well, it's not that they don't do something. I think for many people, including the likes of PIMCO, it's a matter of when and not if they do more. But it's the composition of the package. Do they move away from offsetting the income shock towards incentivizing rehiring? Do they get the mix of the policy equation wrong? That, for me, is the big concern this month, Tom.
Lisa, we forget the scope and scale of this. We get into math and we go to our Bloomberg terminals and it all gets impersonal. And the fact is, the claims statistic today at 1.3 million, call it, I'm going to say that's 5, even 6 times larger than normal. We forget the scope and scale of where we are.
What to me summed this up was a chart from Torsten Slok over at Deutsche Bank showing that nearly half the American workforce is out of a job currently, that you can just see the participation rate plummeting. And there is a question, just going to Betsy Stevenson's point, how permanent will this be? How do we read this very messy data to give some inclination of that heading toward the end of the year, Tom?
Before we get to Tom Porcelli, John Farrell, I want one more thought from you, very, very important here. When we look at the data and all, we have to fold it into market reaction. Why are stocks going up, John, if we're so miserable?
Well, Tom, I don't have the answer to that one this morning, but over the last few months, I think the direction of travel matters. We have reopened these economies. The direction of travel is positive, but quite clearly in the month of June, a real tug of war has emerged, and I think we've got 2 separate camps in this market. Those that believe we will continue to see positive improvement that will drive equities higher, even if growth is anemic, and those on the other side of the trade that are more concerned about below-capacity economic growth for an extended period of time, weighing on risk appetite. That's the tug of war in this market playing out over the last several weeks.
A surveillance miracle this morning. We just got through the previous conversation, folks, without mentioning V-shape. We break that rule now with Tom Porcelli of RBC Capital Markets. Tom, thrilled to have you on here with Jobs Day. I know it's not a V-shaped recovery. Then what is it? Well, we've got some technical difficulties there. We're going to pick it up here as we're 25 minutes away from that report. Lisa, I look at, the idea of the alphabet soup, and I've never been a fan of it, even back to the days of green shoots and that idiocy as well. I think we've really given up on the alphabet soup, Lisa, haven't we?
Oh, I don't know about that. I was actually reading a story in the Wall Street Journal that was citing an economic survey out of the University of Chicago that called the shape of the recovery a reverse radical shape. They were talking about a reverse square root line. I mean, honestly, if you want to get to the alphabet soup, it's still going strong, Tom. So I don't know.
And John Farrell, this is so important because I'll go to Governor Bailey, literally he was 2 days on the job at the Bank of England, and he's talking about a V-shaped model coming out of the Bank of England. In the United Kingdom, John, have they amended the V-shaped certitude the Bank of England had,
Look,
6 weeks ago?
Let's just put the V-shaped talk well and truly to bed. When you reopen the economy after it's been shut down, the bounce will look like a V. But let's go back to what Steve Major of HSBC said in the opening of our program. The bounce is not the recovery. Don't extrapolate out the immediate improvement in the aftermath of a shutdown. For the whole recovery, it's not going to look like this. You'll get that initial snapback, and then you'll start to see some plateauing. And I think on top of that, Tom, we've seen quite clearly across many states in the United States of America the limits of normalization. And if it's not the governors pulling back on reopening, pausing or reversing, it's businesses pulling back themselves. We saw that with Apple over the last couple of weeks. We saw it with McDonald's in the last 24 hours. We've seen it with the Walt Disney Company as well. It's been company after company after company. Tom, regardless of what these governors do, if businesses do not think it's safe for employees to come back, for consumers to walk into their stores, they won't reopen. And that's the big challenge for a lot of people at the moment.
If you're just joining us, our simulcast on radio and television, Jonathan Farrell, Lisa Bramwitz, I'm Tom Keene. As we drive to this jobs day, James Glassman is scheduled to be with us, among others. And, of course, all of this crescendoing through John Farrell's property, The Open, to a conversation with Lawrence Kudlow. Lisa, I look at the White House response to all this, and I would say that Mr. Mnuchin has really been out front. His testimony today, the other day, rather, with Chairman Powell and all. But what I would really suggest, Lisa, is the White House is going to have to really reform with the Kudlow interview today, whatever those statistics are.
Well, and thread the needle that both you and John have been talking about, and rightly so, this idea that there is some distinction between the economic recovery and the method with which this nation is addressing the pandemic. Those are one and the same, ultimately, at least in the views of Fed Chair Jay Powell, as well as Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin. A lot of people saying that how we address the spread of this pandemic is going to mark the economic recovery. How much are we going to hear that from the administration today is going to be a key question. I'm sure John will hammer on that. And I know that perhaps President Trump will signal his view on that later today at 11:30 a.m. as well.
We're going to reattach right now with Tom Purcelli. He's with RBC Capital Market. Tom, just because of the time that we have left, what would you expect to see at 8:30? Is it the jobs report, or is it the claims number that you'll pay attention to?
Well, I think because today's a unique day and that we're going to get both on the same day, which is obviously very unusual, we really need to pay attention to both. I mean, look, I think the risk is that you see a much firmer payroll report than is expected right now. I mean, our expectations that you could see upwards of 8 million jobs gained in the current month. Again, that's very consistent with the home-based data that we've been looking at. It's consistent with the idea that you saw claims, sort of improve to some extent over the survey weeks. But I think, and I heard some of your conversation there, I think what we need to keep in mind, though, is over the second half of June, however, you really started to see a slowing. I think, the rise in cases is obviously starting to scare people. So you started the home-based data, which we've really been leaning on quite a bit. It has really, at this point, started to sort of playing out a little bit. And you can see that in some of the other data as well, whether it is, open table reservations. I mean, you're starting to see some data really sort of stabilize here. Again, on the back of what is, fear around the rise in cases. I would add one more thing, if you don't mind, particularly with regard to what you were talking about on the recovery and the letters and how you want to define it. We've been pretty clear on this. If a V-shaped recovery is a simple act of one quarter declining by a lot and the very next quarter increasing by a lot. You're probably going to see V-shaped recovery. But I don't think that's the right way of defining recovery. The right way of defining recovery is how long does it take to get back to the pre-COVID-19 levels of output. And in that regard, that's going to take well into 2021. So, I think it just depends how you want to sort of define recovery. But I think the right way is how long does it take to get back to pre-COVID levels.
Tom, in your latest research, you talk about this little inkling of a plateauing in consumer metrics. And I think what we all need to try and do, away from the professional world that you belong to, just outside of that, is try and look at the same data that you're looking at. Can you give us a better picture of the data points we need to establish where this economy is?
Yeah, so, and as we've talked about a couple of times, John, you and I think it's really about alternative data right now. I mean, it's funny, we say alternative data, which is now actually becoming mainstream data. But I think it's not the standard stuff, right? I mean, the unemployment rate and the payroll report, I mean, to be honest, they're not giving you a great read on where we just came from. I think things like that home-based data that I mentioned, I think that's incredibly helpful. There's still a free element out there that they're providing on their website, although now you have to pay apparently to get the live stuff. I think the DTS, right? The daily treasury statement. I mean, I think again, it's been out there forever. No one pays attention to it. But I think if you look at some of the withheld tax withholding data, that's going to be really helpful. The open table data that I mentioned, Apple Mobility. I mean, there's actually a host of different data points out there that I think anyone, if they sort of wanted to, they can easily find it. Google Trends is another sort of great example. I mean, you could sort of define any search function you want and see how people are searching for it. I mean, there's a wealth of information out there that's really sort of leading us to conclude that June was, for the most part, a really good month, but you are now starting to see some slowing.
So given the fact that we are seeing slowing, what's your revised expectation for unemployment at year end? And what's your expectation for how we're going to get, or whether we're going to get a fiscal response that is commensurate with market expectations?
So our view really hasn't changed on fiscal response or the unemployment rate. We still expect the unemployment rate is going to be somewhere around 8% or so by the end of the year. So obviously, still very elevated relative to where we came from, but down from where we are right now. The one thing I think is very interesting on the unemployment rate is you have to be very careful with the unemployment rate. Even if we're right and you see a plus 8 million for today, the unemployment rate is probably still going to remain pretty elevated, and that's because of PUA, the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance. That's a very elevated number right now, and we're not seeing that really move all that much. So that's one of these elements where you could see it show up in the household part of the survey, not the establishment part of the survey. PUA will not be captured by establishment, but it will be captured by the household. So I think in the very near term, you're going to see a very sticky unemployment rate. I mean, we expect the unemployment rate is going to be right around 14% for the coming couple of months. But by the time you get to the end of the year, we do expect some improvement down to 8%. And then again, even as we roll into 2021, there's a whole host of additional uncertainties. I mean, not just about coronavirus or COVID-19, it's about the elections as well. So I think that the unemployment rate is going to remain elevated relative to where we just came from.
Just a snapshot of the low visibility world we live in right now. Tom, always enjoy catching up with you. Enjoy the long weekend. My best to you, yours, and the team at RBC. Tom Porcelli there, RBC's chief U.S. economist. In your market right now, elevated, as Tom pointed out, up 24 on the S&P 500, advancing 0.8%, 18 minutes away from the payrolls report from New York City. This is Bloomberg.
Now let's see what else is going on around the world. Here with the latest headlines is Amy Morris. Good morning, Amy.
Good morning, Tom. Over half of all the states in the U.S. seeing a rise in COVID-19 cases. Several places in the South and West, including Arizona and Texas, reporting single-day case records. FDA Commissioner and White House Coronavirus Task Force member Dr. Stephen Hahn tells ABC's Good Morning America individual safety measures are key to controlling the spread, including wearing a mask in public.
The President's Coronavirus Task Force guidelines, we need to follow those guidelines. Follow your local protocols for screening, frequent hand washing, bring hand sanitizer. Socially distancing is really important, and if you can't socially distance, wear a mask.
And healthcare officials say it'll still be months before a vaccine is ready for the public. Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studios, global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. On a Thursday morning, I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology, makes innovation happen. NJIT faculty mentored Christoph Camacho when he was a student, helping him co-found a startup and patent a device that uses drone technology for reforestation and to collect value.
Stop placed on British pound at 125.12. Okay, if it will be executed, it will give us £200 profit. Let's see, and that's it. Position closed on British pound against USD, United States dollar, with £200 in profit.
Channels or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg.
For the friendships, for the fresh air, for the space to grow, for the knowledge, for the sport, for the outdoor education, for the wide horizons, for the academic excellence, for the future. Unleash your child's education at West Buckland School, a co-educational day and boarding school in beautiful North Devon. If you're moving to the southwest for a better quality of life, this is education without compromise, in what the Good Schools Guide called a gem of a school in an exceptional location. To see for yourself, find us at westbuckland.com.
Hey, I'm Robin, one of the tech experts here to help you at Curry's PC World. I'm not just a voice on the radio. You can now come into your local store and talk tech with a human being like me. Just the news you needed this afternoon. We've put all the right measures in place to help you again safely in your local Staples Corner store. The tech experts are back in town, so come in and see if that washing machine can handle all that laundry. And welcome back to your local Curry's PC World.
If you can build that flat-pack wardrobe without looking at the instructions, you've still got it. If you can manage 5 keepy uppies on your first go, you've without question still got it. If you can toss a pancake to the ceiling and not let it hit the floor, surely you've still got it. And if you can just about fit into those jeans you bought 5 years ago, you've definitely still got it. Brute, still got it.
Going to look good, but it's going to be in the rearview mirror, and it's going to be a dead cat bounce. And it's clear that the high frequency data and everything we're seeing says that we just hit a wall because of the spike in cases in the Sun Belt.
Professor Paul Krugman there weighing in on the recovery we've seen so far and whether it's a head fake for what's still to come. I think many people sharing that view, the consensus view being you get that snapback, that bounce, but the recovery will be a whole lot harder after the summer. From New York City this morning on this Payrolls Thursday, good morning to you all. Alongside Tom Keene and Lisa Abramovitz, I'm Jonathan Ferro. This is Bloomberg Surveillance with around about 12 minutes to go until the payrolls report. Tom Keene, equity futures elevated, up 23, call it 24 points higher on the S&P. We advance around about 0.75%.
Well, our marching orders to our team, John, was to get a really smart set of voices with a broad cross-sections of take on economics, finance, investment. We've done that, moving from Ellen Zentner to Betsy Stevenson of Michigan to Tom Porcelli, and now always joining us, James Glassman of J.P. Morgan. He has a wonderful sense of the fabric of our labor economy from sea to shining sea. Jim, you've been on the road. You've experienced the pandemic airplanes. What are you hearing from J.P. Morgan clients?
Well, it's all over the map, as you would guess, right? If you're in the consumer products businesses, they're having a hard time keeping up with things. If you're higher education or municipalities, there's challenges ahead. But I think we've done a good job. We had 40 million people basically who had no job to go to back in March and April, small businesses.
Yep.
And the fact that the PPP program did a great job helping businesses get a lot of those people back on the payroll. So I think the financial support that we're getting from a lot of what Congress is doing is helping to help throw out lifelines for people. There's a big challenge for the next 6 months as you try to run a business under social distancing guidelines. So I hear stories all over the map, and I think it's encouraging. No, you're getting people starting to move.
But, Jim, this is so important, and John Farrow and Lisa have been all over this today, this urgency of fiscal stimulus as well. Do the people that you talk to support $1 trillion of support?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, actually, the Congress has authorized up to $4 trillion. The way I look at it, having the economy down about 10% from where it was, you're losing about $6 billion a day. So that tells you we've done an awful lot to try to replace the income that people are not getting, and you see that in the personal income reports. Disposable income up a lot, saving up a lot, just not many places to go spend money until you open up the economy. But I don't, there's more work to do, is my guess, because a lot of folks are not getting the revenues. You can't run a restaurant with half the people that you used to serve. And same thing for municipalities. They're not getting the folks I've talked to, D.C., Florida, Nashville, California, they're losing a lot of revenues from the lack of tourism. So there is very difficult for them to figure out what to do. The thing that we know is there's going to be a medical answer in the relatively sometime in the near future. So my guess is Congress is working hard to try to figure out how to give people lifelines that need it. You can't get everybody at first, but I think they did a great job of focusing on the people who were on the front lines, the folks who work at small businesses, restaurants, bars, fitness centers, sports venues, the orchestras. Those guys, you knew if we're not allowed to go to that activity, you know that they're not going to be jobs. And I think that helped folks in Washington focus on what the first order of business was. It's been helpful.
Jim, you may have taken an airplane. I still picture you in your VW Bug that I imagine you in, driving around the nation, or the VW van, talking to everybody and getting a feel about the walkabout economics, as Danny Blanchflower of Dartmouth calls it. I am wondering, there is going to be an answer to the virus, a medical answer. What will be the psychological effect on households in terms of saving, in terms of spending habits, and the other?
I'm placing a new order. Short British pound to United States dollar at 125.14. Right here. Okay.
All this saving that's going on, it's not because people are nervous and frightened. It's because there aren't as many places to go to. The minute we start to feel comfortable getting back to life, you're going to see everything return very quickly to something more normal.
Jim. This is crucial. Are you saying that people saying that habits are completely changing and that things are going to look completely different on the other side of it, that's all overstated and that things will return more to normal than people are currently giving credit to?
No, I wouldn't say it's overstated. I think right now there is a lot of fear, and you see it everywhere. And I think once we get a medical answer, the main fear here is if you get it, it's devastating, and a lot of people have been devastated by it. You don't want to give it to your parents, but if you feel like there's a medical answer, it'll take time. But I think once we get a medical answer, we'll say, well, that was a pandemic. Some things that we're doing, this crisis will accelerate some things, moving to online, virtual meetings. Maybe people are rethinking living in concentrated areas, but I think that'll be more subtle. I think once you feel, look what's going on now. You let people go to the beach, open up the bars, and everybody's rushing back to try to get to something more normal. So I think once the fear of the disease has passed, we will be happy to get back to life, give a few hugs, go see friends. You can tell that this is already, people have an instinct to do this now.
A dreamy Jim Glassman, maybe what we need this morning. I can't wait either, I think. Jim Glassman, great to catch up with you, sir. Joining us from JP Morgan. The June payrolls report, 5 minutes away with full coverage on Bloomberg TV and radio. Tom Keene, let's get set up, shall we? Equity futures elevated up at 24 on the S&P 500, up 0.8%. Your estimate just climbing up a little bit into this, Tom. Your median estimate, 3.23 million for your payrolls jobs report in 5 minutes.
Biggest thing for me, John, first chart I looked at today, I'll be quick. The VIX, the volatility index, in under 28. That's a huge deal to move from 32 and breach through 28. And the chart construction, it's called a point figure chart, John. I'm not going to go into it. It is an extremely constructive and bullish VIX chart this morning.
It tells you something about the year we've had when the VIX at 30, Tom Keene, is something constructive compared to where we were a couple of years ago on that number. From New York, up next, the June payrolls report. Alongside Tom Keene and Lisa Abravis, I'm Jonathan Ferro, and we're live on Bloomberg Radio and Bloomberg TV.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing...
Order to sell short consult. It's too late. Okay. Let's see, maybe I will place order later.
Registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong. Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Thursday afternoon by the scruff of the neck. Ignore this rainy weather and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree, you get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
In line with government guidelines, face coverings are now compulsory on public transport. At Asda, you can get a 4-pack of Prima disposable face coverings for £2.80, or a 2-pack of washable face coverings from £2.50. Asda, we're all in this together. Selected stores subject to availability.
How do we control coronavirus now? This is Scott. He's a nurse.
NHS Test and Trace helps stop the spread of the virus in our communities. If you've got symptoms, even mild ones, get a test immediately. Don't leave home for any other reason. If you test positive, we can trace the people you've been in contact with and contain the virus. So get tested and protect each other.
To get a test, go to nhs.uk/coronavirus or call 119. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
From New York City, this is Bloomberg Surveillance for our audience worldwide. We're live on Bloomberg TV and Bloomberg Radio. The June payrolls report just seconds away, with equity futures elevated up 22 points on the S&P 500, up 8, calling 0.9%. Here's the jobs report. Here's Mike McKee.
Well, John, it's better than expected for a second month in a row. The change in non-farm payrolls were up 4,800,000. That's better than the 3,230,000 consensus estimate. As for the unemployment rate, it falls to 11.1% from 13.3%. And I'm just going to quickly check here and see what they say about the misclassification error. There are still errors in there, and they say if everyone was properly classified, the unemployment rate would have been about 1 percentage point higher. So we're at 11.1, would have been 12.1. It brings the level of mistakes down, but they are still in the data. Average weekly hours fall to 34.5 from 34.7. Earnings drop 1.2%, while that on a month-over-month basis, which brings earnings down to 5% on a yearly basis, was 6.7 in May, but of course that number distorted by who is and who is not on payrolls at this point. Let's take a look at some of the other numbers here. The unemployment rates for minorities, a big issue with Black Lives Matter right now. Black or African American unemployment falls to 15.4% from 16.8%. Hispanic falls to 14.5 from 17.6. So still a lot of unemployment in the minority communities. We're seeing an overall, again, unemployment rate of 11.1%. Taking a look at some of the big categories of jobs at this point, mining and logging down 10%, down 10,000, but construction jobs up 158,000, manufacturing jobs 356,000 more jobs, more people at work. And then in terms of service jobs, 4,263,000. So most of the job gains in services and in the leisure and hospitality area, that's half of it, 2,088,000. Government jobs, we gained 33,000. In May, we lost 533,000. So a lot of concern about whether we would see people fall off the payrolls in governments as they had to cut back because of the expenditures for COVID, but they apparently did not have to significantly in the month of June. So that's the basics here. 4,800,000 jobs created, 90,000 additional jobs in revisions. So a pretty good number, better than expected. The question now, with everybody reclosing some of the reopened states, is how many of these people on payrolls in June will be there in July, guys?
Well, Mike, let's get the price action first. A nice tidy bounce in the data and a bounce in the equity market too, up by 40 points on the S&P 500. We advanced by 1.3%. That's the move in the equity market. Interested to see the bond market not move a whole lot off the back of this. Treasury yields at the moment on my screen on the Bloomberg, your 10-year yield up by just 2 basis points to 0.69, call it 0.7%. Mike McKee, there is a bit of a problem for a lot of people at the moment with the bounce in the payrolls report, how it reconciles with what's happening with continuing claims. Do those two numbers stack up for you?
Well, it's kind of hard to fit them, given what's been going on. The jobless claims numbers, 1,427,000, which is not all that different from the 1,482,000 we saw last week. Continuing claims rise a little bit, 19,290,000. So at this point, we're still seeing an enormous number of people who are out of work and still getting checks. There are some concerns that Bloomberg News wrote about yesterday, and I'd advise everybody to look up this story, that we're seeing some double counting in the states because of the pandemic assistance.
Stop on profits to Japanese yen. The position we hold it from yesterday or before yesterday. So the position we opened on, it was short position on 107.638. I'm placing the stop for 107.618.
Their recovery unemployment level down lower. For example, do they go from 10% unemployment at the end of the year to 8%? Which would you suggest it will be?
I think people are going to hold off. It's a good question for Jeff in terms of how you trade this. I think people will hold off because of the closings that we are seeing and the high frequency data. You look at things like Homebase, which tracks small business employment, and there has been a decline in the last couple of weeks. Remember, payrolls are based on the payroll week that includes the 12th of the month. So this is early June data, and the later weeks of June have seen cities and states reclose again a lot of their industries, so we may see people fall off in the next payrolls report. Right. And I think economists are going to want to see that before they make any conclusions.
If you're just joining us, our simulcast on Bloomberg Radio and Bloomberg Television of this jobs report, truly historic in its confusion. Michael McKee, our chief economic correspondent there, with a great dissertation. Lisa, I went right to the U6 augmented unemployment rate, the all-in rate, the U6 rate, and I was stunned that it came into a flat 18% number. And to me, that allows for some significant adjustment in forecast, trying to game out Q3 and, more importantly, to game out Q4.
You raise a great point. I also do want to say Ellen Zentner nailed it. She had predicted an 11.2% unemployment rate on the heels of this report, 11.1%. Kudos to her yet again for absolutely slamming the prediction in a market that is incredibly uncertain. Look, Tom, I'm struggling to reconcile the better than expected jobs report for June with initial jobless claims still coming in the excess of 1.4 million individuals looking for those claims, and the fact that the unemployment benefits, the ongoing claims are still so elevated. I just am trying to understand that, and I think that that will be a serious area of inquiry in the months ahead, Tom.
John, you've been quiet, no doubt, looking at this raft of data. What do you observe?
Just looking at wages falling back, Tom. Low-wage segment of this labour market quite clearly coming back into the workforce, and that's pulling down the average wage growth. And I think that tells a story of just the amount of churn that is still going on here as we bounce back and reopen. We've got to work our way through that to get a clearer idea about the trajectory of this recovery. It's just too soon. I welcome the bounce. The bounce is important. It's important to make sure we recover quickly, but I think it's still far too early to extrapolate out the performance, the improvement we're seeing too far, too quickly, Tom. The recovery after summer is going to get tough and it's going to need more support. And I hope that the improvement we're seeing is still going to be supplemented by an extra fiscal effort down in Washington. And when I catch up with Larry Kudlow, that's going to be the majority, the focus of the interview as we get our teeth into these numbers.
No question about that. Jonathan Farrow with Mr. Kudlow here in a bit. Right now, we have to look systemically at the systematic multi-strategy approach of BlackRock, and we can do that with Jeffrey Rosenberg. He joins us now, hugely prodigious on the dynamics of the market and how it folds back into fixed income. Jeff, let me get out front of your next July note. What is the distinction right now in bond dynamics that has your attention?
Well, on the bond dynamic side, away from the payroll report, it's really about yesterday's news, and it's about the discussion around yield curve control, or what the Fed wants to call it, yield curve targeting, because the front end of the yield curve is pinned at zero. There's no doubt about that. The uncertainty in the bond market is about the shape of the yield curve as you move further out in the maturities. That's really where monetary policy and the uncertainty is centered, because you have these two great unprecedented pressures on that curve. On the one side, the fiscal policy that Jonathan just talked about, support for the economy, for financial markets, is being funded in the Treasury market, and it is an historic expansion in the amount of supply of debt. On the other side is the Fed that has said up till now, for market functioning, they're going to expand the balance sheet to maintain that market functioning. So we're going to start to pivot away from that market functioning conversation to a conversation around QE, around LSAPs, around further accommodation. And so in the bond market, that's where all the uncertainty lies. It's about the shape of the curve, about yield curve targeting.
When the market moves, we do more data checks for you. Futures up 37, Dow futures up. It's a round number, so I'll mention it. 400, up 400 points. Right up buttressed on 26,000 on the Dow. The VIX comes in a big stick, 1.66 points, 26.96 on the VIX. Jeff Rosenberg's bond market's asleep. 2-year yield 0.16%. Jeff doesn't care about the 10-year or the 30-year. I look, Jeff Rosenberg, at the bond dynamics here, and come on, equity market up, looking out to 2021. Is there a risk here that the bond market looks out to 2021 and all of a sudden it's yield up, price lower?
Possibly. If we're talking about the back end of the curve, and that's, where you're just highlighting there's no movement in the front end of the curve because that's all pinned, it is really going to be about whether or not we've had success on the virus and the combination of fiscal and monetary policy getting success around inflation expectations. Very hard to see that today at historic low levels of inflation and inflation expectations. But if you're going to have a scenario where you could have the bond market up and the equity market up, getting back to a little bit of inflation could be a positive. It's a tricky conversation because there could be a slippery slope from a little bit of inflation being good to a little bit of inflation being not good. And so that's going to be that further out 2021 dynamic. Certainly not the dynamic today in terms of inflation and inflation fears. But remember, this is the goal, fighting inflation from below, meaning we have too little inflation. So if there's going to be higher interest rates, it might be welcomed by the Fed in a little bit steeper of a curve, pricing in a little bit higher inflation expectations.
Jeff, on a day like today, we're getting all this data with respect to the U.S. labor market. Would you trade on any of it?
I think that Mike McKee had the framing of the data exactly right, that this is old news. It's good news, but it's news that it was already reflected in prices. And we've moved beyond the kind of early June market to, in a high-frequency basis, really having the debate in market prices about the next payroll report, which is, if you look at this one, the biggest category of improvement is leisure and hospitality. It was down over 7 million in April. It was up in May. It's up today, over 2 million. That's going to go down in July if these shutdowns, if the spread of the virus remains uncontained. And that's what the market's focused on in the high-frequency data. So I think this is a little bit of good news, but not news to move the market.
So, Jeff, this is what surprises me. You're saying it was priced in and people are looking to the potential bad news going forward. The higher frequency data that we got, the 8:30 release, was the initial jobless claims data, which was worse than expected, with more than 1.4 million jobless claims coming in, and with the ongoing claims also coming in higher than expected. Why is the market focusing more on the upside surprise in the June jobs report when that is farther backward looking than the initial jobless claims, which point toward an acceleration of reclosure?
Well, you know, it's a great question. I think it's really important to remember just the scope of flows that we're talking about here. So these are unprecedentedly large flows into the labor market and out of the labor market. So when you're looking at that 4.8 million number, that's a net number of maybe 15 million leaving, or 10 million leaving and 15 million entering. And so these are really, really large gross flows. And inside of that, the scope of uncertainty is just, you know, we really don't know what to expect. Remember, the range in the Bloomberg survey was minus 500,000 to plus 9 million. I mean, no one really knows how to forecast these flows in employment. So 1.427 on initial jobless claims versus, you know, that survey, it's within the margin of error. And that's why you're not really seeing the market reacting to that higher initial jobless claims. It's more the story of this report, which is the story of June, economy reopening, flows back into the economy, big increases in retail, leisure, and hospitality. The change, as Jonathan highlighted, the decline in hourly earnings is a reflection of the labor force starting to redistribute back to the lower wage workers that were most harmed. So all of that is consistent with what I think we were pricing in back in early June.
Jeff Rosenberg, one final question, and I'll keep it sort of philosophic here on a sleepy summer Thursday. The Powell put has never been more putty than the put is right now. Is this a normal bond market? I mean, it's almost like the system's rigged by central bank action. Are you working systematically within a normal bond market?
No. It's a really good question, Tom, and you know, you read the minutes and they talk a lot about the historical precedents. So it's not normal in any sense of what we've thought of as normal functioning of the bond markets. We have had experiences with yield curve control, with financial repression in the United States. It was the aftermath of World War II up until the 51 Treasury Fed Accord. That is the period that is more like where we are today. So when you think about the Treasury market and you think about the functioning of risk-free rates in our financial markets as a base for understanding financial market pricing, you really have to reassess your assumptions from a systematic point of view. We have to relook at what's in the data, what's underlying the data that we see, and how that changes when the fundamental underpinnings of the structure of the Treasury rates are now really pinned at zero, the zero lower bound, and we're going to debate over the next couple of months how far out that control or that targeting moves out the curve. But to answer your question, this is absolutely a very different environment than anything in the post-51 environment.
Jeff Rosenberg of BlackRock, thank you so much. Right now, we're going to go back to our chief economic correspondent, Michael McKee, and I'm going to show you, folks, a little bit of inside surveillance baseball. I'll look at a number, and I'll round it up, and I'll be sort of like, yeah, you know, whatever, it's 20 million. Lisa Abramowitz is a responsible adult, and she'll round it up correctly with all that fancy Chicago math she took to 15 million. McKee, he won't even go to 15 million. He'll use scientific notation and go 14.661 times 10 to the 6. That's a number of jobs still out there. Michael McKee, that's a big number, 14.6 million that we've got to recover.
That's how many jobs, according to the establishment survey, we are below where we were at the high in February. So according to this number, we're still 14.6 million jobs lower, and there are 14.6 million people who don't have work right now. I'll let you, while I talk, come up with what the standard deviation is for that. But it does show the hole remains really, really big, and the folks on Wall Street may trade higher on this because it's good news and it shows we are recovering. But there's a long way to go, and the question is, how many of these people are going to have jobs to come back to, especially when you see the lockdown starting again in some places. Will companies be able to hold on? Another interesting thought in the numbers here, though, is that the unemployment rate comes down even though we had a significant rise in the civilian labor force, up by 1.7 million. So it's not just that people have fallen out of the labor force. They're coming back. They're looking for jobs, and some of them are finding them. This is also something I want to mention. Don't think of this as jobs created. This is jobs restored right now. We have a long way to go. People are looking for jobs out there, and they're hoping that they can go back to where they were. The question is, can they do that, Lisa?
Yeah, well, Mike, I want to talk about what Jeff Rosenberg said, this idea that the jobs report for June was much better than expected, whereas the initial claims were just a little worse than expected. So the story of the June jobs data overwhelms some of the more negative signs that we're getting in the higher frequency data. Can you give us a sense of just how much better than expected the June jobs report really was?
Well, it's significantly better than expected. There was a very wide range of estimates. 9 million was the high, 500,000 was the low. So we came up with, because of the number of jobs in there, a median of 3.2 million. So beating it by 1.5 million is pretty good. But on the other hand, as I said, we still have a long way to go. And when you look at continuing claims, I mean, the market wants to go higher, so it's looking at the jobs headline number, even though that's old data. I suspect over the next couple of weeks, we'll go back to watching claims. We'll go back to watching some of the other high-frequency data, and continuing claims, which is now 2 weeks old, at that point had started to rise again. We'll see if next week it rises even further as jobs shut down out in California and Arizona and Florida and Texas, and we see people who were going back to work no longer back to work, and they can refile and get some more unemployment insurance. I think that will start to overwhelm people, start to take over the market psychology once we get past today.
Michael McKee, thank you so much. Always the best minutia, the best data, the best analysis given any economic report, and particularly on this historic day for the American labor economy. What we've tried to do today, and our team did a great job of booking in smart voices. Willem Bouter joined us, formerly with Citigroup. Great to talk to Professor Bouter. Ellen Zentner, Lisa mentioned, did so well in her forecasting. Jeffrey Rosenberg. But now we want to pull it back to, okay, what do I do over the weekend to think about what I'm going to do with courage and confidence Monday to be in this market. Stephen Chivarone is with Federated Hermes, and he's really, really quite good at the foolishness and the smarts of balancing, of adjusting, of amending a portfolio. Stephen, is this the time to be bold? Is this the time to move to active management from index funds? Is this the time to have courage?
Yes, I think it is a time to have courage. It's time to have, measured courage. So what I mean by that is, look, if we didn't have a pickup in infections, I know that that's obviously a big if, but if we didn't, right now would be a time to be maximum bullish, because you're exiting recession, you're entering recovery, you've got a lot of slack in the economy that can be worked off. And so with that in mind, you should tilt bullish here. Now, you then have to bring back into mind that you do have a pickup in infections, and that needs to caution that bullishness some and temper it some. But we still think you want to be weighted overweight equities. And I think when you think about active versus passive right here, I think it's as simple as this. Look out your window. Not every company is going to be okay. Not everyone is going to make it through this. I can't own everything. I don't want to own everything right now. And I think that good, careful research and the ability to pick the winners and avoid the losers is more important now than it's been at any point in the last 10 years.
Steve, understanding that, taken from an index level, is the bullish bet on equities basically heads you win, tails you can't lose? Basically the idea that good news is great. It could mean a V-shaped recovery, and bad news is just fine because you've got the federal government behind your back with potential fiscal stimulus as well as Federal Reserve monetary policy getting easier and easier.
Yes, I mean, I think, let me say it this way. We spent a lot of time thinking about the shape of the recovery, and that's important because it impacts people's lives. However, I think what the market focuses on is only the right-hand shape of whatever letter you're talking about. See, V, U, and W all have one thing in common. They finish with a move that's up and to the right. And that's, I think, what the market is thinking about, is not what the immediate path to that recovery is going to be, but that as they look out a year or two, there's some faith that we're going to figure out how to live with this, and we're pricing in the up and to the right move at the back end of that recovery. That's, I think, Steve, why the market is leading the economy. Right. Sorry, Tom.
Right. Steve, we're running out of time. Stephen, one final question. I think it's really important because I'm still in the triple leveraged all cash fund. Which sector is the surprise sector for the next 6 months? Of our listeners, our viewers, they got to catch up. Nobody's really in this market. Which sector surprises?
Look, I think if we continue to get data like today, it's going to be the cyclical sectors. I think you could very well see in this environment, a sector like industrials might pick up, particularly if you start pricing in a Democratic presidency and you start thinking about an infrastructure bill, or the general increase in the recovery. Again, I don't know if that's the base case, but if there's a big surprise, I think that could be it.
Steve, this has been wonderful. Steve Chiavarone, thank you so much with Federated Hermes. We really need, again, to say thank you to our team for just a great, great week, particularly the special work of Craig Gordon in Washington, helping us with the interview with Ambassador Bolton as well. Coming up with this market up, Dow Futures up 400 points. I quote Dow Futures to keep John Farrell happy. He's got some pretty good guests on the open here. Michael Collins, PGIM, Aaron Brown of PIMCO will be along. A guy named Reeder from BlackRock. Not bad. We had Rosenberg. He has Reeder. I'll let you decide who's better. I'm kidding. Mohamed El-Erian will join John Farrell. That'll be a really important discussion with Dr. El-Erian. Lisa really touched on some of that game theory of up, and the negative side is not going down, which is a really interesting twist to it all as well. And then there's a conversation with Mr. Kudlow coming up after Dr. El-Erian as well. Lisa, what's your observation as we close out this holiday-lengthened work week?
I think Mike McKee summed it up. The market wants to go up. They want to see whatever backside of the letter they choose, whether it's U, V, W, or I guess reverse radical. Is that what the University of Chicago economists called it? And they see the up, and they're going with it.
Well, never, ever dull. The VIX well under a 27. That really gets your attention. Of course, coming down from 80 a long, long time ago. We're watching dollar dynamics, no doubt weaker. Everything correlated in here with higher yields. I saw the 10-year yield out to 0.70% as well. Again, if you're just joining us, stay with us through the day for our discussion of this job restoration, as Michael McKee called it. I think that was a perfect phrase. Jobs restored across America. This is Bloomberg.
Have you wanted to speak a new...
Hey, I'm Robin, one of the tech experts, here to help you at Curry's PC World. I'm not just a voice on the radio. You can now come into your local store and talk tech with a human being like me. Just the news you needed this afternoon. We've put all the right measures in place to help you again safely in your local Staples Corner store. The tech experts are back in town, so come in and see if that vacuum can take care of your well-trodden home. And welcome back to your local Curry's PC World.
My name is Donya. I moved to Manchester in 2010. I came from Afghanistan. The first school day was a bit tough. I had no friends, couldn't speak English, and felt a bit left out. My high school teacher was very supportive. She matched me up with friends that spoke the same language as me. Having friends gave me a lot of confidence. I felt like I'm not being left out.
Teaching. Every lesson shapes a life. Get free one-to-one support with our teacher training advisors to get one step closer to the classroom. Subject to eligibility. Search Get Into Teaching.
Mike's mother of all marinades.
I love my homemade barbecue marinades. The only problem is no one else does. So today I'm trying something new. Caramelized crispy pork belly tumbled in sea salt, red chili, black pepper and sugar. And sweet sticky chicken fillets in tangy mango, coconut and lime. This is amazing.
Yeah, because you didn't make it.
Introducing the new Fire Pit range, exclusively at Tesco. Food Love Stories, brought to you by Tesco. Available in the majority of larger stores while stocks last.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
With millions of podcasts dropping new episodes all the time, how do you keep up with all your favorites? TuneIn makes it easy. Simply head to the home screen and find your new episode section to see the latest additions.
Looking for your daily fix of NFL news and analysis?
In that. So we had to blow it up and do Super Bowl predictions instead. Because
Look no further than the Pick Six podcast, where CBS sports writer Will Brinson gets you up to speed with what's trending in the NFL that day, so that you're always in the know.
Yeah, it's pretty revealing of Brinson's methodology for predictions. When he gets mad at people for predicting good teams are going to win the Super Bowl or good players are going to win major awards. That's how you wind up.
Search Pick Six on TuneIn to listen.
We're all guilty of spending too much time on social media. Why not add something genuinely useful to your feed with TuneIn? Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to learn about some of the best stuff happening around the app. You might just discover your next audio obsession. How do hockey fans know what day it is? Just turn on the Locked on NHL podcast, where a rotating cast of hockey experts guide you through the week with a different theme show for every day. From big news Monday to recap Friday.
But we've got a couple of news items that are noteworthy in the NHL in the last week, one of which is below the NHL, and we'll bring that up first. So the AHL announced officially, this has been speculated for weeks and weeks, but the AHL...
Search Locked on NHL on TuneIn to listen.
This week on the New Yorker Radio Hour, Hilton Knowles on the unrest that followed a police killing in his Brooklyn neighborhood more than 50 years ago.
Standing by my mother's living room window, I tried tentatively to ask her why our world was burning. She gave me a forbidding look. Boy, be quiet so you can survive, her eyes seemed to say.
Hilton Knowles on the New Yorker Radio Hour from WNYC Studios. Listen to this episode on TuneIn today.
In a trade war.
You benefit if you're just further away from China.
So that you can too.
What are the ramifications if she crumbles or doesn't crumble?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Surveillance Economics.
A lot of us are still in a bit of a guessing game, trying to determine how severe the downturn will be. The only thing that can bring an end to the crisis is containing the disease.
Finance.
We are the one country where people depend on employment for health insurance in the middle of a health crisis.
Investment.
Real yield is a scarce asset these days. It's just unknowable, of course, where things are going.
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Good Thursday morning from New York City and points beyond to our worldwide audience. Jobs numbers, they come in better than expected for the second month in a row. Equity futures are higher on the back of the jobs data, with the S&P futures up over 1.3%. Yields up modestly. The 10-year sitting at around the 0.7%. WTI crude oil back up over that $40 per barrel level. To get the latest on those equity futures moving here this morning, let's bring in Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson. Dave, what are you looking at?
You got to start with Tesla today, Paul. I mean, come on. This is a stock that more than doubled in the second quarter. It surpassed Toyota yesterday to become the world's largest automaker by market value. And today it's up 9%. The electric car maker delivered more than 90,000 vehicles during the second quarter.
But doesn't Toyota do that in like a week or a day?
Yeah, maybe a week. But in any case, that total was 9% higher than analysts' average estimate in the Bloomberg survey. So positive results out of Tesla. Boeing's up 3%. U.S. regulators completed 3 days of testing on the 737 MAX jet. They must now decide whether to allow the plane to fly again after a 15-month grounding tied to 2 fatal crashes. You've got Pfizer up 3%. The drug maker shares are higher for a second day after the release of favorable study data on a proposed COVID-19 vaccine. Now, Pfizer was up yesterday by 3.2%. The company's developing the vaccine with Germany's BioNTech. You've got airlines higher. Alaska Air Group up 3.5%. Now, their Alaska Airlines unit, basically their main business, lined up $1.2 billion in private loans backed by 61 of its planes. The funding will be made available as early as today. So you look across the group, you see American up 4.5%, Delta up 3.5%, Southwest up 3%, and United also higher by 4.5%. We've got some deals to talk about. One stock that'll be worth watching is Lemonade. This is the online home insurer backed by Japan's SoftBank Group. Company raised $319 million in an initial public offering. The shares were sold at $29 each, above a proposed price range. So, again, that will start trading today. Brookfield Property Partners, real estate investor, up 15%. The company began offering to buy back about 17% of its partnership units for $890 million. There's also a similar offer made by a related company, Brookfield Property REIT, and those shares are higher by 14.5%. Now, Property Partners, the ticker is BPY, Property REIT, BPYU, in case you're keeping score. Then there's XP. This is a Brazilian company, online brokerage, up 5%. It's selling $830 million of shares on behalf of U.S. private equity firm General Atlantic and other investors. Now, General Atlantic is XP's second largest shareholder. You've got Coty up 4%. The cosmetics company named former L'Oreal executive Sue Nabi as chief executive officer. She'll succeed Coty founder Peter Harf, who will remain chairman. National Beverage up 6%. The maker of LaCroix sparkling water reported fiscal fourth quarter earnings that topped the highest analyst estimate in the Bloomberg survey. Sales also beat projections. Avis Budget Group up 10.5%. The car rental company was raised the equivalent of buy from hold at Morgan Stanley. Analyst Adam Jonas said he sees Avis Budget taking away market share from Hertz Global Holdings, which, as you may recall, is in Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And speaking of Chapter 11, PG&E up 2.5%. The owner of Pacific Gas and Electric emerged from the biggest utility bankruptcy in U.S. history. PG&E exited Chapter 11 proceedings about a year and a half after collapsing under $30 billion of liabilities from wildfires.
Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson, thank you so much. We appreciate that. Lots going on in the marketplace today. A lot of stock moves, lots of M&A, as Dave mentioned. We've got earnings coming up in a couple of weeks. But today, it's all about the jobs data coming in much better than expected. Let's dig a little bit deeper with Jay Bryson, Wells Fargo chief economist. I'll speak slowly, Jay, for you because I know you're a graduate and a PhD graduate of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And as a Dookie here, as a Dookie alumni, I'll speak a little bit slowly, okay, for you, Doctor. So, Jay, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. What do you make of this jobs data here? Is this just kind of catching up as we kind of reopened here, or do you see anything a little bit deeper in there?
Well, so, yes, there is some catching up that to be done here. Recall that we lost between February and April, we lost 22 million jobs. Yep. Now we have gotten about 7 million back. So as the economy reopened in May and June, this is what you're kind of seeing here. I think it's going to be interesting when we get to this July report because if there's any bad news here this morning, and I don't want to stress that, but initial jobless claims remain high, continuing jobless claims remain high, and we all know that some states have started to go into reverse recently in terms of reopening, and so these big employment gains are probably behind us at this point.
Jay Bryson with us, and wonderful to have you with us, Jay, today. Futures up 40. Dow futures continue to advance up 439, 26,016 on the Dow, almost in two big figures on the VIX, 26.68. Jay, when I saw the numbers, and I get the idea that this is as good as it gets, and now we really learn the cost of this pandemic, great. Will economists over the weekend, particularly at Wells Fargo, will they readjust the level, the percentage of unemployment rate we're going to see at the end of the year? or will they just simply bring it in closer? If these are better numbers, is the recovery of December now the recovery of October?
Well, yeah, I think, Tom, that there is something to be said of that. I mean, it's interesting when you look at the technical details here. What the BLS has been saying is that there's been people who've been misclassified up until this point. That is, when the BLS calls these people and asks them questions, these people were saying, "Yes, I'm on payroll. I didn't work. I didn't work this week because of quote other reasons. You know, it's because of the pandemic. They were furloughed from their jobs, and so when you calculate the unemployment rate, these people were considered to be employed, but they really weren't. They were really furloughed." And so there was some sense that was bringing down the unemployment rate by too much. And what we've learned with this June report is that misclassification error is a lot lower. So this 11.1% unemployment rate seems to be closer to, the quote true unemployment rate at this point.
Yeah.
And so we're probably not going to get a bounce back up. And so, yeah, I would think that we are already pretty low in terms of our unemployment rate at the end of the year. So I don't know if we're going to be making a lot of adjustments to that, but I could see other shops bringing their unemployment rate numbers down.
Those sirens you hear, folks, we welcome all of you worldwide. That is the North Carolina State Police running to the rescue of how we have someone from Duke and North Carolina UNC on at the same time.
On at the same time.
That's what those sirens are.
That's right. Just a little, trying to prevent a little bit of a issue here. Jay, it's interesting here. What is your sense of kind of the underlying health of the labor market here? I mean, again, we kind of had a couple of months here where we came back better than expected. But as we shake out to the other side of this thing, it looks like we're having some significant resurgence in some key markets. I think about California, Texas, Florida. Those are key labor markets. Do you expect to see kind of some less than good news over the next month or two?
Yeah, so if I was given a letter grade, the unemployment or the health of the economy, the labor market, back in February would have been an A. Where are we now? We're, kind of at a C. And I understand at Duke, a C is a really good grade there. But, for most of us, it's kind of mediocre.
See that, Tom?
And, we have, as we said earlier, we have gotten the bounce from furloughed workers coming back. But there are probably millions of businesses that aren't coming back. They've closed for good. And those people aren't going to go back to a job anytime soon. And so, by the end of next year, we're still thinking the unemployment rate's going to be at 6%. And in February, it was 3.5%. I mean, we're not going back to that anytime soon. And so, we're moving in the right direction. Things are better, but there's still going to be millions of Americans who are going to be unemployed, and they're probably going to be unemployed for a long period of time.
It's too short a time. Jay Bryson, we got to do this again soon. Jay Bryson, Wells Fargo, thank you so much. Huge news. So I do want to point out, folks, the president scheduled for a press conference in 20 minutes. With our news in Washington, here's Amy Morris.
Thank you, Tom. Coronavirus cases are surging across the South. Arizona and Texas reporting single-day case records. Intensive care units in Houston have now exceeded their capacity. While more than half of all U.S. states are reporting surges in caseloads, FDA Commissioner Dr. Stephen Hahn says vaccine developers are scrambling to find a solution.
FDA has given an authorization to proceed with clinical trials for 4 separate vaccines. And we expect 2 of these vaccines to go in the late stage of clinical trials, which are large clinical trials, in this month, July.
Hahn believes the U.S. will have a successful vaccine by the end of the year. House lawmakers, meanwhile, passed a bill imposing sanctions on banks that do business with Chinese officials involved in cracking down on pro-democracy protesters in Hong Kong. The measure could head to the president's desk as soon as today. This as China's government and pro-Beijing activists in Hong Kong are actually condemning that legislation. Now, they're calling it foreign meddling in the territory's affairs. A foreign ministry spokesman urged the U.S. to abide by international law and not sign that sanction bill into law. The Defense Authorization Bill unanimously passed the House Armed Services Committee, including a provision that would rename military bases named for Confederate generals. President Trump has already threatened to veto the Senate's version of that same bill. And the long Independence Day weekend is here. The Trump administration promising one of the largest fireworks displays in memory in Washington on the 4th of July. It also plans to give away as many as 300,000 to anyone who goes down to the National Mall in D.C. for those festivities, although they will not be required to wear them. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg. Tom and Paul.
Amy, thanks so much. Greatly appreciate that. Again, the president with a press conference scheduled here now in 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes, and of course we'll have team coverage there. As we always do with radio and television, and our Craig Gordon-led Washington team, I know, is really looking at that carefully. I know after the interview with John Bolton yesterday, Ambassador Bolton noted the conversation that will be had between the White House and Capitol Hill on this matter of Russia. Funding the Taliban to go after Marines in Afghanistan, and that will be an incredibly important meeting. It was yesterday, no today. The Gang of Eight, the senior officers of our legislative branch meeting with the intelligence directors of the White House. I believe that's going on after the president speaks. So we'll look at that as well. If you're just joining us, a buoyant jobs report, better than the forecast, and the forecast was a mess. Paul Sweeney, stocks are bid.
Stocks are bid, Tom, and we've seen that kind of across the board over the last, certainly 3, 4, 5 weeks. The market's looking for any nugget of good news, and when they get it, they bid stocks. And even when the news may not be so great, you still have that backstop, which is the U.S. Federal Reserve.
Well, we'll have to see as well. Let me come over here. I can do this. I have a complete Bloomberg terminal on my iPhone, which is very, very
You're running the world, Tom, from your iPhone.
I am running the world here. And it's actually extraordinary how easy it is to use. 26.91 is the VIX. Futures up 41. Dow futures off the jobs report up 421 points. Stay with us. This is Bloomberg.
President of the Jewish Communal Fund, Zoya Raines, and her husband, Robert Friedman, Jewish activists and philanthropists, talk about why they chose the Jewish Communal Fund for their charitable giving.
As very busy working parents, we wanted to focus more on the charity part of it and wanted to focus more on our children and less on the administration.
The Jewish Communal Fund is one of the oldest and largest donor-advised funds, but at the same time, they're totally up to date and have state-of-the-art systems for us to access and manage our contributions online. The assets in our fund at the JCF grow tax-free, so we can generate more charitable dollars to support the charities that we care about most.
Let JCF minimize your taxes and maximize your charitable giving.
We're incredibly passionate about our charity, and the JCF allows us to focus more on the charity and less on the administration and the headaches.
For more information about Jewish Communal Fund, visit our website at jcfny.org and request a new fund kit.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Influential conversation.
Hey, I'm Robin, one of the tech experts, here to help you at Corey's PC World. I'm not just a voice on the radio. You can now come into your local store and talk tech with a human being like me. Just the news you needed this afternoon. We've put all the right measures in place to help you again safely in your local Staples Corner store. The tech experts are back in town, so come in and see if that fridge can hold enough for your hungry household. And welcome back to your local Curry's PC World.
In line with government guidelines, face coverings are now compulsory on public transport. At Asda, you can get a 4-pack of Prima disposable face coverings for £2.80. Or a 2-pack of washable face coverings from £2.50. Asda, we're all in this together. Selected stores subject to availability.
How do we control coronavirus now? Listen to Claudia. She's a care worker.
I got the call from NHS Test and Trace. Told I'd been in contact with someone with coronavirus. Couldn't believe it. I had to isolate at home for 14 days. Couldn't go to work, couldn't go to the shops, couldn't get out to exercise. I didn't even feel ill. But you know what? To protect my family, my friends, my community, well, you just do it, don't you?
Stay alert, control the virus, save lives.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow, and U.S. stock index futures are climbing after a better-than-estimated jobs report indicated an economic rebound from the sharpest contraction on record. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 39 points, Dow futures up 420, NASDAQ futures up 100. The DAX in Germany is up 2.5%. 10-year Treasury down 6/30 seconds, yield 0.69%. The yield on the 2-year 0.16%. NYMEX crude oil up 1.4%, up 58 cents at $40.40 a barrel. COMEX gold is down 0.2% or $3.90 at $17.7620 an ounce. The euro 1.1261 against the dollar. British pound 1.2478 and the yen 107.65. S&P 500 contracts are soaring as government data showed payrolls rose by 4.8 million in June after an upwardly revised 2.7 million gain in the prior month. The unemployment rate fell to 11.1%. And watching shares of Tesla up 9% this morning after reporting deliveries that beat the average analyst estimate. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thank you so much. Greatly, greatly appreciated, Karen. This is a joy, folks. This is a year you could pack it in, but that was never the spirit of Arthur Fiedler. And I'm going to go back, folks, to my childhood. Keith Lockhart doesn't know this, but I was weaned, absolutely weaned on the Boston Pops. I would sit in Wellesley Hills. My grandparents had that 1812 Tchaikovsky overture from I think it was the Minnesota Orchestra, and I was ordered at gunpoint to listen to it 6 times a day around July. And then something happened. Arthur Fiedler from 1930, an institution, he had the audacity to get old. Paul, this was like Williams to Yastrzemski. It was that bad. I have the clearest memory of Keith Who. He came in under the greatest pressure of anybody, I'm sure of anybody, maybe when Bernstein was thrown out New York Philharmonic. Other than that, no, this was the toughest shoes to fill in the history of classical music. And Keith Lockhart absolutely nailed it with the Boston Pops 20-some years ago. We're thrilled he could join us right now. Keith, what was it like, the first Pops, when you had to step into those shoes?
Well, hi, Tom. Hi, Paul. You left out that other guy, John Williams, in between Arthur and myself.
Yeah, he went off to Hollywood and made movies.
So, yeah, well, but he whatever happened to John Williams? Yeah, exactly. It was my first season was 1995, so this would have been my 26th 4th of July. And it all went by in a blur. I started in May with concerts. I did probably 35 concerts before the 4th of July, but I don't remember any of them because I was just too busy, watching my world turn upside down. But I came out to the 4th. I think it's really the first moment I noticed because I walked out onto that stage on the Hatch Shell, the Esplanade, and saw a sea of people. And even the people I couldn't see, because you can't see 500,000 people. They can't all sit close enough for you to see them. And you could feel, like, the humanity, that incredible concentration. And I walked out on that stage briskly to the center to take a bow, and I was thinking to myself, whoa, what have you done now?
Yeah, you look at this, Keith, and, of course, this year is so different, folks. We've pieced together the greatest hits of before because you can't get the crowd together as well. What do you do with the orchestra? I mean, what do you do this year to keep the cellos away from the violins because of the pandemic and all? How are you going to handle that?
Well, this year we are not. There's no live performance of the Boston Pops. There's no way. We announced it about a month ago, but honestly, by late March we were looking at each other going, "This ain't going to happen." Nobody is going to green light 500,000 people in the audience and 80 people on a tiny stage, 100 people on a tiny stage.
Yeah.
So we started looking at what to do, and we decided to do a retrospective concert that will air on Bloomberg at 8 o'clock on 4th of July on all your platforms. And it is some of the best moments, the greatest guest artists we've had over the last 3 years of content, which really gives us an A-list like you wouldn't believe, because we could never have afforded to have all those people in the same year. But it's new introductions that I have done along with the Bloomberg hosts for the telecast. We shot them on an eerily empty hat shell a week ago to put into the show, and some new content that is reflective of the time we're in. Recording of Summon the Heroes that was done virtually with all the orchestra members in their basements, and a new socially distanced performance between me and an amazing gospel singer named Bernice King that I hope will really stick in people's minds.
Keith, how are your musicians faring here? I mean, it's been several months here. They've obviously not been able to get together as an orchestra. How are you keeping in touch with them? How are they doing? What's going on there?
Well, this is a tough time for a lot of people, but the performing arts industry has been particularly badly hit because there is simply no viable outlet right now. People talk about coming back and having capacity controls in the houses and things like that, but you got to understand that the arts were a marginal business at best before all of this, and you can't make the numbers work at a 30% house capacity. So we have a situation, the Boston Symphony and Boston Pops have hunkered down, and there have been furloughs on the staff, and they agreed to reduction of all those full-time players. But the people you normally see on the Esplanade on the 4th of July are all freelancers who work for us, and they have all been cut loose for the moment. So it's a very difficult time, in some cases an existentially difficult time for a lot of my colleagues and friends.
Keith Lockhart, to look worldwide, and of course the leadership of the Boston Symphony for years, I mean truly folks, decades if not generations. If you were to read Gramophone magazine or the others of the classical industry, right now what do we need to do to get the kids engaged in the expanse of classical music? What is, with all your experience, all of our listeners want to know, how do I get my kids interested in this? What's the Lockhart prescription?
Well, I would say two things. One of them is that the whole industry, especially us at the Boston Pops, have really taken a giant step forward in terms of our virtual presence and our ability to reach people virtually. The online presence of the Boston Pops and the Boston Symphony has grown immensely, many-fold over these last 3 months. And that's a tool that we can continue to use to bring people to live performance, which is our ultimate goal. And it's obviously a tool by which our younger people get the vast majority of their stimulation, good or bad. And the other thing I'd say to everybody, and this is in the face of, a lot of school districts are going to have a hard time with this. People are going to be laying off specialists. Participation is the biggest key to an audience of people who are interested in the great things like the performing arts and like music. Giving your kid violin lessons when they ask for them, supporting them when they want to play the trumpet, having them play in the school band, the school orchestra, sing in the choir. It's just like baseball wouldn't survive if none of us had ever played baseball. It's something you really have to have an appreciation for what's going on the stage to really be eager to find out more about what's in it. So I would say that when people are looking at the easy things to cut, like arts programs, that they should think very carefully about that.
Yeah. From Arthur Fiedler to John Williams to Keith Lockhart, thank you so much, Keith Lockhart. We really look forward to the Boston Pops across all of the Bloomberg platforms. Look for that Saturday, 8 p.m. That would be July 4th. What you need to know, markets up and up big off of a surprise, a better than good jobs report amid this pandemic. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know, with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Stock future.
Different adapts. Different overcomes. Different keeps moving. Different keeps thinking. Different stays connected. Different never stops dreaming. The University of Northampton invites you to a virtual open day for a taste of all the benefits of studying with us from this September. Search University of Northampton Virtual Open Days. It's the future, but different.
Hey, I'm Robin, one of the tech experts here to help you at Curry's PC World. I'm not just a voice on the radio. You can now come into your local store and talk tech with a human being like me. Just the news you needed this afternoon. We've put all the right measures in place to help you again safely in your local Staples Corner store. The tech experts are back in town, so come in and see if that vacuum can take care of your well-trodden home. And welcome back to your local Curry's PC World.
In line with government guidelines, face coverings are now compulsory on public transport. At Asda, you can get a 4-pack of Prima disposable face coverings for £2.80, or a 2-pack of washable face coverings from £2.50. Asda, we're all in this together. Selected stores subject to availability.
If you can build that flat-pack wardrobe without looking at the instructions, you've still got it. If you can manage 5 keepy uppies on your first go, you've without question still got it. If you can toss a pancake to the ceiling and not let it hit the floor, surely you've still got it. And if you can just about fit into those jeans you bought 5 years ago, you've definitely still got it. Brute, still got it.
Casting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Hey, good morning. I'm Karen Moscow, along with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney. The opening bell brought to you by SEI, with an operating platform designed to support all major asset classes, diverse strategies, and investment vehicles. SEI is redefining wealth management. Learn more at SEIC.com/IMS. The S&P 500 is higher at the open. It's up 1.2% or 36 points at 3152. The Dow Jones Industrial Average up 1.4% or 364 points at 26,100. And the NASDAQ up 1.1% 1% or 114 points at 10,269. 10-year Treasury down 5/32, yield 0.69%. The yield on the 2-year 0.16%. NYMEX crude oil up 1.3% or 52 cents at $40.35 a barrel. And COMEX gold is little change, down 80 cents at $17.79.20 an ounce. The euro 1.1267 against the dollar. The yen at 107.60. Tom and Paul.
Karen, thanks so much for awaiting a press conference of the President of the United States. In the meantime, Gina Martin Adams with us. Thrilled she could be with us. Bloomberg Intelligence on the stock market. You're not in. Gina, how does corporate behavior change as stocks advance, as multiples get richer? Does M&A pick up or does it diminish?
It's a really good question. I think it depends upon the broader environment that you're in and why stocks are advancing. There's a couple of big supports to M&A for the big survivors of the coronavirus that have held on pretty well and are even expanding in this environment. Rates have gone to rock bottom levels, and it's extremely cheap to debt finance any acquisitions. Now, at the same time, most of those companies actually happen to be your high cash holders, so they've already got a tremendous store of cash capital on their balance sheets, and their stocks have held up really well. So they have the opportunity to absolutely go out, tap the debt market, and or utilize the cash that they have on hand to buy super cheap stocks. I mean, this is the interesting thing about the market right now is you've got this really remarkable divergence between the market at large, which, yes, looks somewhat expensive, trading at greater than 20 times multiple, and 2/3 of stocks within the market that are actually still trading at multiples below their 5-year average. So the winners have gotten much bigger. And their capital is much more available, and they can certainly buy cheap to the extent that they can find those cheap values. They should be there.
I don't mean rude to interrupt, Gina, but what you're saying is more important than what the president's going to say. So, it's a joke, folks. But Gina, I get the idea that the successful can go after the low multiple companies. That's great. But can't they go after themselves with optimism and confidence if they just extend out the timeline of where they find value within that transaction? Instead of a 3-year view, they go, let's pick up this fully priced high multiple. It's synergistic. It helps our market share and all that with a 5 or 7-year view.
They can. I think it's a tougher proposition, but if they can find those opportunities for growth, they almost have to invest in them. And I say that because the growth prospects are very concentrated in specific types of industries. They're very concentrated in digitization, for example, as a theme. They're very concentrated in broader technology and healthcare development as a theme. It's very different than times past, for instance, when we could see mass M&A transactions across multiple industries. This cycle has been a cycle in which tech has largely driven a lot of the transaction volume, and especially because financials have been left completely out of this story. You think about how your sector allocation works. Tech is absolutely a gigantic portion of the U.S. economy and of the U.S. markets, but financials is not far behind, and to have financials not really participating in M&A has resulted in kind of this lackluster M&A environment overall. It's much more concentrated in industries where growth prospects are there. Obviously, if you want to see a much healthier condition develop for M&A at large, you probably need to see a lot more movement in rates, which would stimulate the financial sector to get busy. But we're not likely to see that. We're going to see continued stagnation in rates, and while values are relatively cheap in that space, the relatively flat yield curve, low rates at large have created this sort of secular environment of limited risk-taking in the financial sector. You pile on top of that the regulatory environment, both here and in Europe, and financials have been the big laggards. So I would say you still have this concentrated environment of, strong players going after other growth sources within their universe, and some of the groups are just left out until you start to see some major changes in the rates landscape.
So, Gina, just real quickly, are you concerned about the lack of breadth in this market? You said it's kind of led by tech, and a lot of other 2/3 of the companies are kind of below their average multiple.
I wasn't until June. We had seen breadth recover pretty precipitously, actually, and we got to the point where 90% of participants in the S&P 500 were trading above their 200-day moving average. We got above 50% on on other measures. But over the course of June, we've seen a lot of mess develop.
Gina, thank you so much. Gina Martin Adams with Bloomberg. And now, folks, the President of the United States.
Larry Kudlow. I'd like to just announce the spectacular news for American workers and American families and for our country as a whole. There's not been anything like this, a record-setting. It was just put out that the United States economy added almost 5 million jobs in the month of June, shattering all expectations. I was watching this morning, and the expectations were much lower than that. The stock market is doing extremely well, which means to me jobs. That's what it means, jobs. This is the largest monthly jobs gain in the history of our country. The unemployment rate fell by more than 2 percentage points, down to just about 11%. We're down to the 11% number. We started at a number very much higher than that. As you know, we broke the record last month, and we broke it again this month in an even bigger way. This news comes on top of May's extraordinary jobs report, which was revised upwards, by the way, to 2.7 million jobs. It was 2.5. That was last month, and that was a record setter. But it actually got a little bit better. We revised it, and it was revised upward to 2.7 million jobs for a combined total of 7.5 million jobs created in the last 2 months, and that's a record by many millions of jobs. So it's 7.5 million jobs created in the last 2 months alone. Today's announcement proves that our economy is roaring back. It's coming back extremely strong. We have some areas where we're putting out the flames or the fires, and that's working out well. We're working very closely with governors, and I think it's working out very well. I think you'll see that shortly. In June, we added 2.1 million leisure and hospitality jobs, 740,000 retail jobs, 568,000 education and healthcare jobs, 357,000 service jobs. These are all historic numbers. And 356,000 manufacturing jobs. And manufacturing looks like it's ready to really take off at a level that it's never been before. And a lot of that has to do with our trade policy, because we're bringing manufacturing back to our country. And these take a long time to get going, and they're now going. So these are historic numbers. I'm really happy when I see 356,000 manufacturing jobs, and that's just a small number compared to what it will be soon because of our great trade deals.
All right, as you can see, position closed on Japanese yen. We closed position just before US market opened, about here. So extra 200 pounds in our pocket.
Added in the last 2 months, and that's a record by a lot. Likewise, Hispanic employment is up by 1.5 million jobs, a record by a lot. Hispanic employment up 1.5 million jobs. 3 million more women were employed in the month of June, a record. Never had a number like that. Workers with a high school education or less made the biggest strides of all. So people that have just a high school education or have less than a high school education. With unemployment, those without a high school diploma dropped a full 3.3 percentage points. That's the largest drop in recorded history. 80% of small businesses are now open, 80%. And we think we're going to have some very good numbers in the coming months because others are opening. And especially as we put the flame out, getting rid of the flame, it's happening. New business applications have doubled since late March. That's a number that is not even thinkable to achieve this early into a pandemic. The latest ISM manufacturing report rose 10 percentage points, with new orders jumping a remarkable 25 percentage points, all a record. Consumer confidence, which is great, that's a great number to me because that means confidence is really good. If you don't have good consumer confidence, It's like life. If you don't have confidence, you're not going to do very well. Consumer confidence has risen 12 points since April, and 6-month job expectations hit an all-time high. So think of that for a second. With all we go through, with all of the trials and tribulations that we read about every night, much of it totally fake news, fortunately. And if the consumer didn't get it, you wouldn't have good consumer confidence. We have consumer confidence has risen 12 points since April, an all-time high. Think of that. Retail sales surged an astonishing 18%. So retail sales went up an astonishing 18% in May. That's the largest increase in the history of our country. That's a tremendous number. 18%. The number of, and what it means to me is jobs. The number of unemployed Americans re-entering the labor force rose by 43%. And fewer workers are dropping out of the labor force than before. And the crisis is being handled. You know, if you look, we were talking this morning, something to think about. China was way early, and they're getting under control just now. And Europe was way early, and they're getting under control. We followed them with this terrible China virus, and we are likewise getting under control. Some areas that were very hard hit are now doing very well. Some were doing very well, and we thought they may be gone, and they flare up, and we're putting out the fires. But other places were long before us, and they're now, it's a life. It's got a life. And we're putting out that life, because that's a bad life that we're talking about. But all of this suggests that workers are confident about finding a new job. The stock market is soaring with the best gains in over 20 years. In the second quarter, the Dow Jones increased 18%. This isn't a quarter. 18. These are not numbers that people have heard about. It's the best in 33 years. The S&P 500 increased by almost 20%, the best since 1998 for the quarter. And NASDAQ increased over 30%, the best since 1999. And we had a 50-month, if you look over a long period of time, a phenomenal number. But if you look since the election, we've gone up. The Dow went up close to 45%. The S&P 500 went up 47%. And NASDAQ Composite went up getting close to 100%. So these are numbers that are not numbers that other presidents would have, and they won't have it. The only thing they can kill is a bad president or a president that wants to raise taxes. You want to raise taxes, this whole thing, your 401ks will drop down to nothing, and your stock market will drop down to nothing. This is not just luck, what's happening. This is a lot of talent. All of this incredible news is the result of historic actions my administration has taken working with our partners in Congress to rescue the U.S. economy from a horrible event that was formed, took place in China, and came here, and they could have stopped it. They could have stopped it. Nobody likes to write that, but they could have stopped it. They know it, and I know it. Through the Paycheck Protection Program, we've extended over $520 billion in loans to nearly 5 million small businesses, saving and supporting the jobs of tens of millions of American workers. This has been a tremendous success, levels that nobody's ever seen before. But we saved all of those jobs and all of those small businesses, and some will be large businesses soon, perhaps. We also rushed urgently needed relief to millions and millions of hardworking taxpayers. They got that directly, and we're working on a phase 4. We're working with Congress. That work has started. Steve Mnuchin can give you a little briefing. Talking about payroll tax cuts. We're talking about more money being infused. And it comes back to us. It comes back. It's all coming back. It's coming back faster, bigger, and better than we ever thought possible. These are the numbers. These are not numbers made up by me. These are numbers. We've implemented an aggressive strategy to vanquish and kill the virus and protect Americans at the highest risk, while allowing those at lower risk to return safely to work. That's what's happening. Our health experts continue to address the temporary hotspots in certain cities and counties, and we're working very hard on that, where the relationship with the governors is very good. We made a call, Mike Pence made a call just yesterday and said, what do you need? Not one governor needed anything. They don't need anything. They have all the medical equipment they can have. Thank you, U.S. government. They have all of the ventilators they have. You know, we're giving many ventilators and selling in some cases and giving when needed, but we're the ventilator king. We're now producing thousands of ventilators a week, and we're helping other countries. And other countries are desperately in need of ventilators, because this is now at 189 countries. That changes all the time, that number. Our last count is 189 countries, and many of them don't have money, and almost all of them don't have a capacity to build a ventilator, which is hard to build, very complex, very expensive, very big in many cases. We've done an incredible job. So we have assembly lines building ventilators, and we're building thousands a week. All of these people are working with governors and local officials to restore best practices, and that's what we've done. That includes face coverings, social distancing, testing, and personal hygiene. Wash your hands. State officials will decide how rapidly to open their economies. That's largely up to them. If we see something that's egregious, we've gotten involved with a couple of them where we thought it was unfair. We'd like to see churches opened quickly, and some of them just don't want to do that. In New York, we got a great ruling from a judge, thank you, Judge, that they can open. If these best practices are implemented, then the hot spots can be calmed quickly, and we understand this horrible disease right now. We didn't understand the disease at all. We did the right thing. We closed it up. We would have lost millions of lives. We've done a historic thing. We would have lost millions of lives. And now we're opening it up, and it's opening up far faster than anybody thought even possible, and more successfully. And as I said, you're going to have a fantastic third quarter. It'll be a third quarter the likes of which nobody has ever seen before, in my opinion. And the good thing is the numbers will be coming out just prior to the election, so people will be able to see those numbers. The fourth quarter, likewise, will be extremely good, and maybe most importantly, from the standpoint of our country itself, next year will be a historic year. Next year is going to be an incredible year for jobs, for companies, for growth. Things are happening like nobody would have thought possible. I do want to comment, Boeing, as you know, is moving along in their process. It's been a very hard process, a very complicated process, but they have made tremendous gains, and they're going for approvals on the aircraft, on the 737 MAX. They're also starting to do some real business, so I just want to congratulate Boeing. They've been through so much. I think it was probably the greatest company in the world. I used to say it was the greatest company in the world, and then it ran through a very tough period of time. But I just want to say that Boeing has made tremendous progress in a short period of time. And other companies I don't even have to talk about, because they're all setting records. Virtually every one of our great companies is setting records. So I want to thank everybody for being here today. These are historic numbers in a time that a lot of people would have wilted. They would have wilted, but we didn't wilt, and our country didn't wilt. And I'm very honored to be your president. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bounties in your PDB. So let me just make some additional comments.
I think some questions are on Russia, as we talked to Ambassador Bolton yesterday, and I don't believe the president answered them. A statement, I should say, not a press conference, from President Trump, of course, coming out as any president and taking the victory lap as well. Paul Sweeney has studied many of these victory laps. I have too. Ira Jersey wrote a thesis on this once in college, which is if there's a good unemployment report, somehow the president can free up a schedule each and every morning. Ira, it's like the sun coming up in the east. You get a good jobs report, each president takes a lap, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, they certainly do. And in fact, some presidents do it more successfully than others. So you mentioned about my political science degree in undergraduate in college, and George Bush Sr. was president back then, and he tried to say, hey, the economy's getting better, and you looked at all the numbers, and certainly he was right that the economy was recovering going into the 1992 election cycle, but it was hard for him to convince the general public that was the case. So I think that might be a challenge for President Trump as well. But certainly 4.8 million jobs is nothing to sneeze at.
Well, there we are. The math, folks. I see some really good work. Michael McKee just killed it this morning. Folks, we're 14 million jobs away from where we were in the glow of February. We're now going to go to the Secretary of Treasury. Here is Mr. Mnuchin.
We did social distance, so I'm pleased to see you're all wearing masks. I'm going to let Director Kudlow make a few comments, and then we'll both be happy to take questions.
Thanks, Stephen. Just briefly, underscoring these high-frequency indicators. It's a difficult thing to do. We haven't had much experience with these pandemics, but I will say this. The Apple Mobility Index is a very important index. It's literally a real-time daily indicator, and we're not seeing any declines. It's still strengthening, even, I might add, in some of the southwestern states, which have difficult hotspots. Housing demand and housing surveys are just soaring. Automobile demand now expected for the third quarter, about 10 million plus production units. The trucking surveys look very, very strong. And the Dallas Fed survey, I don't recall if it was in the president's notes, because it's obviously in Texas, a bad hotspot. The Dallas Fed survey, which goes to the end of the month, has not yet shown any declines. Now, it may. I'm not going to rule that out. And I would say, as a general matter, these job numbers, as good as they are erasing a third to a half of those who are unemployed, there's still a lot of hardship and a lot of heartbreak in these numbers. I understand that. And the economy is on its way back. We have a ways to go. I will, however, continue to reference the Congressional Budget Office, which is looking for a very strong third quarter and second half, and a number of private surveys and private forecasters who see the same story on the V-shaped recovery. And with good policies and leadership, 2021 can be a big bang year, and we will be able to get back to the peak levels of 2019. So I believe we're well positioned. I think we have a lot more work to do. I get that. And as Stephen mentioned, we'll see how the policy discussions go later this month. Thanks.
Sure, go ahead.
Mr. Secretary, are you concerned to see new unemployment claims rising? We're at 1.4 million layoffs last week, and that number is actually going up, not going down. Are you concerned about that?
Well, let me just say again, I want to just say we're going to be concerned till every single person is back to work. Now, when you look at these numbers, I think it's tough enough to predict economic numbers in normal times. In these times, you have to look at all these numbers in the entirety. So what I would say on that is there's a lag on the unemployment claims. I think you also know many of these states we set up front are completely backed up. So no, I would focus on the jobs numbers are the most accurate numbers, the trend of 8 million jobs back. But having said that, I'm concerned until we get everybody back to work.
Obviously, this is good news today, no question about it. But it's also obvious that the crisis that is surging through Sunbelt states, record number of cases nationally yesterday, threatens all of these economic gains. Many states are throwing their reopenings into reverse. What additional actions is the administration going to take to stop that? Will the administration and will the president specifically call on Americans to wear masks? And why don't we have, rather than you guys celebrating good news that it's already happened, why don't we have the coronavirus task force up here giving briefings on how to get under control what is obviously not under control, as Anthony Fauci said this week?
Well, let me just say I am on the coronavirus task force, so I'm happy to answer a few of those questions. I can't comment on the schedule of briefings. I'm not aware of that. The president specifically put in his speech encouraging Americans to wear masks, social distance, and hygiene, because he's the president of the United States and people are not around him close, and the people who are around are tested. I don't think he needs to wear a mask, but the rest